Gran stands in a hallway, his expression tight with a mixture of shock and dread as he whispers Najii's name. The timing of this encounter couldn't be worse, casting a shadow of doubt over whether any hope remains in this sudden reunion. He watches as she stands before him, her dark hair cascading like a silken veil, her gaze fixed on a looming, draconic silhouette. With a voice barely above a whisper, she utters the name, Oscar, her expression unreadable but heavy with significance. Far from that tense encounter, the young adventurer finds himself deep in the wilderness, confronted by a massive, reptilian beast. Reacting with practiced ease to the sudden threat, he activates his internal enhancements, feeling the surge of physical strengthening through his limbs while preparing his magical storage for the spoils of the hunt. He lunges forward, the struggle against the creature becoming a dance of survival and skill. This is the life he has chosen, a path of grit and gourmet, where every victory brings a new taste of the wild. The warrior weaves through the beast's clumsy strikes, his movements a blur of calculated precision. He finds an opening, driving his blade into the creature's thick hide as it roars in frustration. With a final, decisive effort, he channels his strength into a devastating blow. The impact resonates through the clearing, the sheer force of his will manifesting in a strike that halts the monster's rampage. Not content with just a physical assault, he deftly deploys a sturdy rope, entangling the beast's limbs to ensure it can no longer pose a threat. His movements are methodical, showing the experience of a seasoned traveler who knows the value of a clean capture. He watches as the massive creature collapses under its own weight, pinned and defeated. The young man stands over his quarry, catching his breath as the silence of the forest returns. Another successful hunt concluded in the unforgiving frontier. Gran stands amidst the jagged rocks of a deep dungeon, reflecting on his current assignment. He has been brought along by a high-ranking party to serve as their porter, tasked with managing their heavy gear and collecting materials from the monsters they defeat. Pasquale, his sword still drawn from a recent skirmish, calls out to him with a commanding shout. He orders the young man to hurry and begin the collection process for the beast they just brought down, as there is no time to waste. The young man responds with a sharp acknowledgement, his hand moving swiftly to the hilt of a specialized harvesting knife secured at his waist. He approaches the massive carcass, knowing that in these high-mana environments, the physical remains of monsters are unstable. As time passes, the creature's body will inevitably decompose into pure mana and vanish back into the dungeon's atmosphere. Working with practiced efficiency, he begins to carve away the most valuable parts of the hide. He must secure these materials quickly, for if the decomposition process accelerates, the spoils of their victory will be lost forever. Nearby, Pasquale and Leon observe his meticulous work. Leon notes that it is highly unusual for an A-rank party to employ a B-rank adventurer as a mere porter, but Pasquale counters that having someone with his combat strength makes a dedicated, low-level luggage carrier unnecessary. Typically, porters are low-ranking adventurers who specialize solely in logistics and transport. They are hired cheaply because they lack the skills for frontline combat, serving as little more than pack animals for more capable warriors. Gran, however, is a unique exception to this rule. He wipes the sweat from his brow, fully aware that he is participating in this raid as a combat-ready member who simply happens to be handling the luggage as well. While the rest of the party, Pasquale, Eris, Leon, and a heavily armored knight, engage a fresh wave of monsters with overwhelming force, he remains focused on his primary task. He stays back, ensuring every valuable resource is salvaged while the others clear the path ahead. Later, during a brief lull in the action, Leon teases him about how he has barely drawn his sword, spending nearly all his time scavenging. He simply nods in agreement, acknowledging that his current contribution is exactly what the party requires of him. He stands with Pasquale and Leon, listening as they praise his performance. Pasquale notes that even in the heat of battle, he manages to collect materials without missing a beat, even recovering from a salamander's strike with a quick potion. Because of his reliability, the party finds that hiring a high-rank porter like him is far more efficient than struggling with low-rank ones who lack combat skills. As they settle into their camp, he begins the task of preparing a meal, much to the anticipation of the hungry group. Ignoring his calm demeanor, Eris demands meat, her stomach rumbling as she suggests he cook up the salamander they just defeated. He asks for a moment of patience, explaining that the meat hasn't been bled yet, and offers a different cut instead. While the others discuss their cravings, one wanting something sweet and another leaning towards fish, he continues his preparations. Najii joins the conversation, promising dessert if they help set the table and prepare the utensils. Following her lead, the group begins arranging the furniture, setting out sturdy wooden chairs and tables to transform the dungeon floor into a dining area. As he reaches into his small pouch to retrieve more supplies, Eris marvels at the seemingly endless capacity of what she calls his mysterious magic bag. Leon corrects her, noting that it isn't a magic bag at all, but rather a rare storage skill. This particular ability allows him to store far more than the pouch's physical size would suggest, effectively stopping time for the items within, a rare and highly sought-after skill that he disguises using a mundane-looking pouch. With the workspace ready, he focuses on the culinary task at hand, stirring a pot of sautéed onions and a mix of wyvern and griffin meat, while reflecting on how he usually keeps his abilities hidden from others to avoid unwanted attention. He carefully adds the finishing touches to the base, pouring in fresh milk and seasoning the mixture with precise amounts of salt, pepper, and a dash of nutmeg. Finally, he cracks several eggs into the bowl, the golden yolks joining the bread crumbs as he prepares a hearty meal for his companions. He begins the preparation by cracking a fresh egg over a bowl of steaming grains, the yolk glistening in the dim light of the dungeon camp. As he vigorously mixes the ingredients, the young porter reflects on the typical dungeon fare. Most adventurers settle for bland, dried rations that require soaking in water, but he finds such meals uninspiring and barely palatable, preferring to use his skills to create something far superior. Nearby, Leon watches the process with wide-eyed astonishment, questioning if all A-rank parties enjoy such lavish spreads while deep underground. Pasquale, leaning back with a knowing look, corrects the misconception, noting that this isn't a standard perk of their rank. The veteran warrior emphasizes that the luxury is entirely due to their porter's presence, clapping a hand onto the young man's shoulder. He explains that having him in the group essentially adds a gourmet option to their expeditions, a rarity that even the most elite teams lack. Undeterred by the praise, the young man focuses on the sizzling pan, carefully searing thick cuts of meat. He knows that while preparing a proper meal takes more effort than simply rehydrating dried food, the result is well worth the labor for the sake of the party's health. He flips the steaks with practiced ease, the aroma filling the small campsite and masking the damp scent of the cavern. His rare storage skill is the secret, allowing him to carry fresh ingredients and heavy cookware that would be impossible for others to manage, ensuring they never have to endure a foul-tasting meal. Once the cooking is complete, he presents the feast to his companions, laying out plates of perfectly cooked steak. Pasquale's eyes light up at the sight of the meat, while the porter encourages everyone to eat their fill, having prepared plenty for the hungry group. The atmosphere turns jubilant as the party digs in, the sound of satisfied chewing and clinking utensils echoing through the cavern. Eris eagerly holds out her plate for seconds, her face lit with joy, while the others savor every bite of the high-quality monster meat. Leon, mid-bite, admits that this meal surpasses the quality of the restaurants he frequents in the city. He realizes that traveling with this particular porter means more than just efficient logistics. It means a level of comfort and culinary excellence rarely found in the wild. Pasquale laughs, reminding the group that as active adventurers, they are in a constant state of growth and need the extra calories to maintain their strength. The young porter watches them with a quiet smile, satisfied that his efforts have bolstered the party's spirits for the challenges ahead. He presents a freshly baked tart to the group, encouraging everyone to save room for dessert after their hearty meal. Around the table, the atmosphere is light as the companions feast together, the lingering tension of the dungeon replaced by the warmth of good food and shared laughter. Amidst the camaraderie, he reflects on his own standing, acknowledging that while he can hold his own in a fight and manage the complex logistics of a journey, he remains a versatile B-rank adventurer, still finding his true place in the world. Later, as the sun shines over the bustling city streets, a familiar voice calls out to him from the entrance of the Grand Adventurers Guild. The armored knight and his young companion bow deeply, expressing their sincere gratitude for his assistance and apologizing for any previous rudeness, promising to work hard to one day reach his level of expertise. With a cheerful wave, he bids them farewell, shouting back that he is certain they will catch up in no time as he continues his walk through the city. Nearby, his current companions continue to discuss the meal, with the veteran warrior admitting that the food was surprisingly delicious, a sentiment the others quietly share as they watch him walk away. The conversation takes a more formal turn when Leon asks if he would consider joining their party permanently, citing his invaluable skills and the seamless way he fits into their dynamic. However, he gently declines the offer, explaining that while he appreciates their trust, he isn't ready to commit to a single group and prefers his current independence. Walking alone once more, he ponders the idea of a permanent party, realizing that while he enjoys the company, a part of him still feels the weight of his B-rank status and a lingering doubt about whether he is truly moving forward or simply filling a convenient role. He eventually steps into the quiet hall of the guild, his mind still occupied by the crossroads of his career and the uncertain path he must choose to walk. He pauses before a notice board, his eyes catching a flyer seeking new residents for a rural retreat. The idea of a quiet life away from the bustle of the capital seems to spark a sudden realization within him, offering a path he hadn't previously considered. Having made his decision, he reflects on his journey while resting in the quiet of the woods. He acknowledges that while he was versatile, he had hit a wall as an adventurer, feeling his growth stagnate. With a newfound sense of purpose, he resolves to leave his old life behind, planning to immerse himself in the countryside, perhaps trying his hand at farming while taking on only the occasional guild task to maintain his lifestyle. This resolve leads him to a secluded, two-story house nestled in the greenery, which he has purchased using his hard-earned savings. Standing before his new home, a sense of liberation washes over him. Here, he can finally utilize his unique skills without the prying eyes of others. As he calls forth his status window, the dawn of his new, slow life in the frontier begins. The young boy carries a secret within him, a collection of memories from a life that should have ended. He stands at the threshold of a new existence, the echoes of a past world still vibrant in his mind. He recalls a place called Japan, a land of steel and glass where a great tower reached for the clouds, a world fundamentally different from the one he now inhabits. In that distant life, he followed a predictable path, growing from a student into a man in a suit, finding his only true solace in the digital realms of video games after long days of work. Within those virtual worlds, he found a sense of freedom and agency that his mundane reality lacked, controlling heroes and gathering treasures with a simple controller in hand. never imagining he would one day live such a fantasy. But that life ended abruptly, and now, as a young boy in a world of magic, he contemplates the strange circumstances of his rebirth and the death that brought him to this rustic, wooden home. 5 years have passed since his arrival in this new realm, and the flood of memories from his previous existence has finally begun to settle into a coherent whole within his young mind. He stirs from sleep in his modest room, the early morning light filtering through the window as he lets out a long, tired yawn, feeling the weight of 2 lifetimes behind his eyes. Fully awake, he turns his gaze toward the window with a small, knowing smile, uttering the command to reveal the hidden mechanics of his new reality. In response to his words, a translucent window manifests before him, displaying a complex array of numbers and attributes that define his current capabilities under the name Grand. With a curious touch, he reaches out to the floating interface, his eyes scanning the data as he begins to understand the true extent of the potential he now possesses in this second life. He finally understands the nature of his existence. By calling upon his status, he can see his inherent gifts and skills laid bare in a way no one else can, quantifying his very soul into data. The interface reveals a startling truth. At only 5 years old, he is already level 11, and his designated profession is that of a hero. His physical and magical capacities far exceed what should be possible for a child, marking him as an anomaly in this world. This revelation brings back memories of his parents' own legendary deeds, specifically how his father, Gantz, was celebrated for vanquishing a demon king alongside his mother, Mina. He realizes that his life in this world was never meant to be ordinary. He is the scion of legends. Standing alone under the open sky, a surge of adrenaline courses through him as the weight of his potential begins to sink in. Even when surrounded by his peers, like the energetic Lena, he can't help but feel a growing sense of detachment. He wonders if he truly is the central figure of some grand narrative, a protagonist destined for greatness, while others live simple lives. As he joins the village men and his father on a hunt, he discovers the practical application of his dexterity gift. It allows him to handle tools and weapons with an unnatural ease, his body moving with a grace that far outstrips his years. While the other children struggle with the basics of archery, he finds that every shot he takes is guided by an instinctive precision, his skills evolving with every pull of the string. However, as his proficiency with physical weapons reaches new heights, he notices a glaring inconsistency within his status screen that dampens his growing confidence. Around him, the other children begin to manifest basic elemental magic, with Lena and their friends conjuring flames and water with ease. Yet he remains unable to produce even a spark. Looking back at his stats, the contradiction is maddening. Despite possessing immense magical power and mana reserves that dwarf everyone else's, the ability to actually cast a spell remains completely out of his reach. He watched the other children with a mix of envy and resignation as they successfully manifested basic magic, something that remained out of his reach. Despite his high potential, his current abilities were only slightly above the average for a 10-year-old, leaving him feeling remarkably ordinary and disconnected from the grand destiny he was told he possessed. This lingering sense of frustration followed him through the quiet streets of the village, making the grand title of hero feel like a distant, meaningless burden. He began to care less about the expectations of others, finding that the weight of a legendary future was too heavy for a boy who just wanted to find his place in the present. Looking out over the rolling hills and the cluster of homes, he realized that the world he inhabited was fundamentally at peace. The tranquility of the landscape suggested that a savior was a relic of a more violent past, not a necessity for the current age. Even the monsters that roamed the nearby forests, like the massive tusked boars, seemed to be merely a part of the natural order rather than a sign of encroaching darkness. They were creatures to be hunted for food, not harbingers of an apocalypse. Far beyond his village, in the great walled cities, legends persisted of a demon king and the hero who would rise to face him. But these felt like stories from another era. The world had moved on, and the tales of ancient conflicts were now just background noise to the daily lives of the common folk. In those distant lands, humans and demi-humans lived and traded in harmony, further reinforcing the idea that the age of heroes had long since passed. The bustling markets were filled with diverse faces, all focused on commerce rather than combat. He often found himself staring up through the canopy of trees, wondering what it truly meant to be a hero, though even that curiosity was beginning to wane. The question felt abstract, a puzzle with no relevance to the rustling leaves and the cool breeze. High above, majestic creatures soared through the clouds, indifferent to the complex systems of jobs and skills that defined human potential. He would only learn much later that the hero job granted mastery over all weapons and magic, a potential that lay dormant while he focused on simpler things. Years passed, and the young boy grew into a capable youth, eventually deciding to leave his home to register at the Adventurers Guild. His motivation wasn't to fulfill a prophecy, but to find his own path and the simple joys he had discovered in place of grand ambitions, stepping out into the world with a pack on his back and a sword at his hip. Upon reaching the age to register, he discovered a unique gift called Explorer, a specialized ability for searching, harvesting, and managing resources. It was a practical, almost unfair advantage that suited his new goals perfectly, surrounding him with shimmering interfaces of light that cataloged the world around him. He has discovered that his storage skill functions as a vast, infinite warehouse within a separate dimension. It is an incredibly convenient tool, capable of holding any non-living object, from simple plants to massive structures, making it the ultimate asset for an aspiring adventurer. As his level and mana increased, the capacity of this mental vault expanded, and he even gained the ability to manipulate the flow of time within it. Once he fully grasped the mechanics of his gift, he dedicated himself to hunting monsters and gathering materials with relentless efficiency. The young explorer threw himself into the fray, his blade flashing as he dispatched wolves and horned rabbits in quick succession. With every victory, the Get notification signaled another successful harvest, filling his invisible inventory with a steady stream of pelts, fangs, and meat. Exhausted but triumphant, he collapsed onto the lush grass, a wide grin spreading across his face as he reviewed his spoils. He marveled at the sheer volume of magic stones and monster parts he had accumulated, realizing that his unique gift made gathering resources almost too easy. A sense of profound peace washed over him as he stared up at the sky. The simple joy of the hunt and the tangible rewards of his labor felt far more fulfilling than any grand, legendary destiny ever could. He lay there for a long time, hands tucked behind his head, reflecting on how much better this life suited his temperament. He wasn't a hero destined for greatness. He was an explorer, and he was finally coming into his own. This newfound purpose eventually led him to establish a modest base of operations, a quiet home nestled in a scenic valley where he could store his treasures and plan his future endeavors in peace. The next morning, he rose with the sun, stretching his limbs in the cool air of his room. He considered the possibilities. With his explorer's skill and the mountain of materials he'd gathered, he could even pursue a career as a master craftsman if he chose to step away from the front lines. Later that day, he made his way to a bustling local bazaar, where the air was thick with the chatter of traders and the promise of rare finds. He noted that on bazaar days, merchants from other towns would often bring unique items that weren't usually available. Accompanied by the young companion he had recently aided, he browsed the stalls with keen interest. They marveled at the array of potions and trinkets on display, the boy's eyes wide with wonder as they searched for hidden treasures among the merchants' wares. He walks alongside his young companion, Kilshi, through the bustling streets of the bazaar. Gran inquires if it is truly acceptable for the youth to have left the shop unattended, but Kilshi reassures him that on a day of such grand festivities, the usual storefront sees very few customers anyway. As they weave through the vibrant crowd, he considers the importance of this excursion. To him, observing the flow of trade and the variety of goods is not just leisure, but a vital part of his ongoing work to understand the economic landscape of this world. Their journey leads them to a merchant displaying an array of exotic wares. Gran's curiosity is immediately piqued by the unusual items, and he asks about their origin. The merchant explains that these goods come from a distant land far to the east, acquired from a traveling trader whose specific details remain a mystery. Among the curiosities, his eyes land on a wooden frame filled with sliding beads. He recognizes it instantly as an abacus, a tool he remembers vividly from the texts of his previous life, though its presence in this realm is a startling and welcome surprise. The merchant, noticing his intense interest, admits he originally purchased the device thinking it was a musical instrument, but since it failed to attract any buyers, he offers it at a steep discount. Gran agrees to the purchase but quickly shifts his focus to a nearby bottle containing a mysterious, dark liquid. The seller explains that the liquid is a bean-based seasoning, though its pungent and unfamiliar aroma has deterred other customers. Gran requests a sample, and upon catching the scent, his suspicions are confirmed. It is soy sauce. Without hesitation, he offers to buy the merchant's entire remaining stock. Seeking more information about these eastern treasures, he asks if such items are common. The merchant recalls purchasing them at the port of Overlow, located on the eastern edge of the Silan Kingdom, from a merchant who hailed from an island nation even further beyond the horizon. The merchant then reveals another specialty from the same source, a clear, potent spirit with a sharp, distinct fragrance. Gran's interest is further ignited as he realizes the potential of finding these familiar comforts from his old world in such an unexpected place. He finalizes the deal, securing the alcohol and the remaining soy sauce. As a gesture of goodwill for the large purchase, the merchant includes a small pouch of mystery seeds obtained from the same eastern trader, leaving Gran to wonder what new crops might soon take root in his garden. With the items safely in his possession, he uses his appraisal skill to confirm their identities: Sasa liquor and shoyu. Though rice remains elusive, the discovery of these authentic flavors brings a sense of profound satisfaction, bridging the gap between his past memories and his present reality. He reflects on the discovery of items from the East, realizing that a land with familiar ingredients and tools exists somewhere in this world. The thought lingers that perhaps he isn't the only one who remembers a different life, wondering if others from his previous world might be out there. As they walk past the quiet outskirts of the town, his companion's voice pulls him from his reverie. Kilshi looks up at him, curious about the strange treasures they just acquired and what their purpose might be. The youth asks specifically about the abacus and the soy sauce, wondering what they are. He explains that they are tools and seasonings from a distant land, though his own deep familiarity with them remains a secret. He admits that while the items are rare here, he has a sense of how they might be used. Kilshi listens intently, fascinated by the idea of things so foreign yet seemingly practical for their daily lives. Holding up the wooden frame with its sliding beads, he describes it as a device for rapid calculation. Kilshi watches the beads click back and forth, amazed that such a simple-looking object could handle complex numbers. The young merchant's eyes widen with realization at the potential of such a tool. He He considers that if a skilled craftsman can't be found to replicate it, he might have to try his hand at building one himself to help the youth's business. The youth eagerly expresses a desire to learn the art of the abacus, seeing it as a vital skill for any merchant. He nods in agreement, promising to teach the youth once they have the time to sit down and practice. Turning his attention to the liquids, he examines the bottle of sake, noting its strong aroma and its origin from fermented grain. He explains that it isn't just for drinking. It can transform the flavor of food when used in cooking. After a small taste of the dark seasoning, the young merchant is struck by the depth of the flavor, finding it incredible despite its dark appearance. The youth remarks on how knowledgeable his companion is, attributing it to a life spent as an adventurer who has seen many things. As they continue their journey, the youth mentions that their travels are usually limited to nearby towns for supplies. He offers a reassuring smile, suggesting that as an adventurer, he could provide protection if the merchant ever wished to venture further into the unknown. He explains that an escort is essential for traveling to distant places, catching the young merchant off guard. The boy blushes, clearly surprised by the sudden and sincere offer of protection. Seeing the boy's hesitation, he places a reassuring hand on his shoulder, reminding him that despite his youthful appearance, he is a capable adventurer. The young merchant stammers out his gratitude, and they agree to head toward the food stalls together. They soon find themselves surrounded by the savory aromas of the market, where he buys a generous portion of grilled skewers. Sitting together on a bench, they begin their meal with a hearty thanks, the simple joy of the food bringing a bright smile to the boy's face. While they eat, he pulls out a small slip of paper he received earlier. His companion identifies it as a lottery ticket issued by the Merchant Guild for those who make purchases at the local stalls. With their hunger satisfied, he suggests they head over to the lottery drawing next. The boy, still holding his own small gift from the merchant, readily agrees to the plan, eager to see what they might win. He continues to eat with gusto, prompting the boy to marvel at his impressive appetite. He simply laughs it off, explaining that for an adventurer, maintaining one's physical strength is the most important investment one can make. He offers the last of the food to his companion, but the boy politely declines, patting his stomach and admitting he is completely full. He promises to try more of the local delicacies during their next visit to the market. Their leisurely stroll through the town takes a more laborious turn as he heaves the massive carcass of a shaggy beast onto his shoulders. The weight seems like nothing to him as they navigate the busy streets toward their destination. They eventually reach a quiet storefront where a woman with long, dark hair stands holding a basket of produce. He asks her where he should set down the heavy load, as it would be a nuisance to keep carrying it inside. She stares in wide-eyed shock at the enormous creature he is casually lugging around. Her younger brother, however, is just happy to be home, calling out a cheerful greeting to her as they arrive. She stands frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief as the young boy effortlessly balances the massive, shaggy carcass of a black buffalo on his shoulders. Kyoshi watches his sister's reaction, a mix of pride and amusement on his face. Recovering from her initial shock, she questions how such a small frame could possibly manage such a weight. Gran casually explains that it was simply a matter of using his physical enhancement skills, though Kyoshi is quick to chime in, emphasizing that he carried the entire beast back from the forest without breaking a sweat. Realizing they shouldn't leave him standing there with the heavy load, the young boy offers to guide Gran to the backyard immediately. Gran nods in agreement, ready to finally set the massive creature down. Soon after, the beast is laid out, its hide removed to reveal the pale, fresh meat beneath. He begins the butchering process with practiced ease, his movements fluid and precise. As he works, he tells Kyoshi that in exchange for the help, he'll take the rump and the tongue for himself, leaving the rest for the family. Watching the process with fascination, the youth asks if parts like the tongue and tail are actually edible. Gran explains that the tongue has a unique texture whether grilled or boiled, while the tail makes for an excellent, rich soup base. Even the bones, he notes, can be used to create a flavorful stock. He continues his lesson, explaining that when living in the wild, one must learn to utilize every part of a kill. Survival often depends on knowing how to prepare whatever the forest provides, a skill he seems to have mastered through necessity. Once the work is complete, the meat is neatly divided into substantial portions. Kyoshi stares at the sheer volume of food, overwhelmed by the bounty Gran has provided for them. Looking over the piles of fresh meat, Gran realizes that such a large quantity won't last long. He suggests they either find a way to preserve it quickly or sell the excess at the market before it begins to spoil. He explains the benefits of smoking the meat, noting that it not only preserves the food for long journeys, but also makes for an excellent snack to accompany a drink. Kyoshi listens intently, realizing the practical value of the harvest they have secured. Seeing the abundance of food, the young boy eagerly invites his savior to stay for dinner and spend the night. Gran accepts the hospitality, deciding that a warm bed and a shared meal are a welcome change from the road. With the decision made, he announces they will prepare steaks, pointing out a prime cut of ribeye that is perfect for the occasion. He recalls the garlic and soy sauce he recently acquired at the bazaar, knowing these seasonings will elevate the dish to something truly special. As he makes his way into the kitchen, a sense of nostalgia washes over him. Whether it is a lingering habit from his previous life or simply a personal standard, he finds that he prefers to handle the cooking himself when quality ingredients are at hand. He begins the preparation with practiced ease, his knife rhythmically striking the wooden board as Kyoshi watches with wide-eyed curiosity. In the pan nearby, a generous pat of butter begins to sizzle and foam, releasing a rich, creamy aroma. The next step involves the garlic, which he tosses into the golden butter. The cloves dance in the heat, their sharp scent mellowing into something savory and irresistible as they begin to brown. This mouth-watering fragrance quickly fills the small home, causing the young boy's stomach to growl in anticipation. Noticing the child's eagerness, the traveler offers a patient smile and tells him that the best flavors require just a moment more of patience. They both turn their attention to the centerpiece of the meal, a massive, beautifully marbled slab of buffalo meat resting on the counter. It is a testament to the day's successful hunt and the bounty of the wild. With a steady hand, he draws his blade through the tender flesh, carving out thick, uniform steaks. Each cut reveals the high quality of the monster meat they are about to enjoy. He finishes the preparation by dusting the steaks with a precise amount of salt and pepper before carefully laying the first piece into the searing pan. The loud hiss of the meat hitting the heat signals that the feast has truly begun. He watches with satisfaction as the thick cut of meat sizzles in the pan, the aroma of garlic and butter filling the small kitchen. He assures his host that the meal is nearly complete, the surface of the steak browning perfectly under his careful watch. While he focuses on the stove, the young woman turns to her brother, asking him to help prepare the table for their guest. The boy responds with an eager nod, moving quickly to assist as the anticipation for the meal grows. Returning his attention to the pan, he hums a light tune, explaining that while everyone has their own preference for how meat is cooked, he personally finds a medium-rare sear to be the most flavorful. With a practiced motion, he tilts the pan to baste the meat, the liquid fat crackling as it coats the steak. The young boy leans in, his eyes wide with wonder as the rich, savory scent washes over him, leaving him breathless. Moments later, he presents the finished masterpiece, black buffalo steak, glistening with sauce and accompanied by a side of vegetables. He sets the plates down before the siblings, inviting them to eat while the food is still hot. The sister watches with a gentle smile as her brother stares at the tender meat, his fork poised and ready. With a look of pure excitement, he takes his first bite, the steam still rising from the plate. As they begin their meal, the room is filled with the sounds of contented eating. The siblings are clearly impressed, their faces lighting up with every savory mouthful of the expertly prepared dish. Pausing to savor the flavor, the young woman remarks on the incredible fragrance and tenderness of the meat. She admits that she had always believed black buffalo to be much tougher and more difficult to eat, but this preparation has completely changed her mind. He joins them in the feast, enjoying the fruits of his labor and the warm company. The atmosphere is relaxed and joyful, a stark contrast to the dangers they faced earlier in the forest. Curious about the unique flavor, the boy asks about the dark seasoning used in the dish. He explains that it is soy sauce, a versatile condiment from a distant land that enhances the natural flavors of the meat, especially when paired with garlic. He explains the complexities of the dark liquid to the young boy, admitting that while he knows of its existence, the exact ingredients and the arduous process of creating it remain a mystery to him. As the boy gazes at the bottle with wonder, the young traveler realizes that introducing such a condiment could spark a culinary revolution, prompting him to consider consulting his merchant contacts or the local guild. Reflecting on his past, he recalls his fruitless search for this rare seasoning in the royal capital, feeling a profound sense of luck for having stumbled upon it here. The conversation expands as the sister joins in, noting that the sauce originates from the Far East, a distance he calculates would take at least a month of travel from the edge of the kingdom. Visualizing the vast, rugged terrain between them and the source, he contemplates the possibility that it might even be an import from a land beyond their known borders, making a quest for it a daunting undertaking. He briefly considers seeking out a mage capable of long-distance teleportation to bridge the gap, but quickly dismisses the thought of dealing with a certain troublesome acquaintance. Looking down at the spread of food before them, he decides to set aside his grand ambitions for the moment, choosing instead to savor the simple joy of the meal. The evening settles into a peaceful rhythm as they eat, and he reflects on his desire to simply enjoy his new home for a while, as an owl watches silently from a nearby branch. After a relaxing soak and a final exchange of gifts and stories, the night draws to a close, marking the end of a successful visit. The following morning, he bids them a warm farewell, promising to return for more supplies as the young boy waves enthusiastically from the doorstep. The young adventurer, Gran, knelt amidst the lush greenery of the forest, his eyes fixed on the vibrant flora. He marveled at the abundance of resources this woodland offered, carefully plucking a specimen to add to his collection. After securing the plant, he checked his satchel, calculating his haul. He reasoned that while he had enough to craft the potions promised to the local shop, a few more ingredients wouldn't hurt, his mind already planning the next batch. Standing amidst a flurry of shimmering magical displays that cataloged his inventory, he paused to reflect. A somber thought crossed his mind. Had he not crossed paths with Kilshi, he might have remained a hermit, forever hidden within the shadows of these very trees. This realization brought a small, contemplative smile to his face. Meeting the youth had been the catalyst that drew him out of his isolation and back toward the world of men. Nestled within the Sorteral territory lies the town of Beeman, a settlement that serves as a gateway between the wild and civilization. Its wooden gates stand firm, welcoming travelers from the surrounding hills. Walking through the bustling streets, the young man observed the local life. Though far removed from the grandeur of the royal capital, Beeman's position on the main road to the border ensured a steady flow of people and goods, giving the rural town a surprisingly vibrant energy. The town's infrastructure reflected its dual nature. A modest adventurers' guild catered to those brave enough to face the forest's monsters, while a merchants' guild thrived as a vital logistics hub. With its numerous inns and lively markets, the town hummed with the constant activity of a community on the move. Drawn by the savory scents wafting through the air, he found himself at a local eatery. When the cook presented a steaming dish with a hearty recommendation, the young traveler's eyes widened in delight, his journey momentarily forgotten in the face of a truly exceptional meal. He sits before a steaming bowl of the chef's recommendation, a rich boa stew that looks incredibly appetizing. Taking a bite, he closes his eyes as the savory flavors explode on his palate, a small sound of delight escaping him. To savor every drop, he tears off a piece of crusty bread and dips it deep into the thick sauce. The meal is a resounding success, and after expressing his gratitude, he leaves a few coins on the table and heads back out into the town. His next destination is a sturdy, multi-story building that serves as the Beeman branch of the Adventurers Guild. Stepping inside, he finds the hall relatively quiet, with only a few other adventurers scattered about the spacious room. He approaches the counter and politely asks the receptionist if he can register this branch as his new base of operations. Handing over his identification, he watches as her eyes widen in shock upon realizing that he is a B-rank adventurer. He listens as she becomes visibly excited, explaining that high-ranking individuals are rare in this region, and having him based here would be a significant boon for the local guild. He quickly tempers her expectations, explaining that although he is B-rank, he isn't actually that strong and shouldn't be relied upon too heavily. Furthermore, since he has just moved and his home is quite a distance from the town, he doesn't plan on taking many requests for the time being, much to her disappointment. He listens as the receptionist suggests that, given his rank, it would be a great help if he could take on some C or B rank requests whenever the mood strikes him. He offers a polite smile, promising to lend his strength once his new life in town has settled. With a light-hearted laugh and a casual wave, the young adventurer bids her farewell, leaving the counter behind. Before exiting, he pauses briefly by the quest board, scanning the various postings. He decides that if any intriguing tasks remain the next time he visits, he might consider taking one then. Stepping out into the crisp air, he makes his way across the bustling street toward the imposing structure of the Merchants Guild. Once inside, he approaches the service desk and places several coins upon the counter, requesting to officially transfer his base of operations to this branch as well. Unlike the Adventurers Guild, where rank is earned through merit and dangerous feats, the Merchants Guild operates on a simpler system of registration and annual fees. By paying the required amount, his standing is secured. He leans against a nearby pillar, reflecting on his choice. Since his only goal is to set up a modest stall at the local bazaar, the entry-level E-rank, with its minimal fees, is more than enough for his needs. His eyes catch a notice regarding the upcoming 5-day market, which explicitly states that those wishing to participate must submit an application at the front desk. Returning to the counter, he informs the attendant of his intent to join the bazaar. With the paperwork underway, he begins planning his next stop, a much-needed shopping trip for supplies. Later, as he treks back toward his home with a heavy pack, he feels a sense of accomplishment, having secured various seeds for his garden. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps causes him to pause and glance back over his shoulder. He pauses on the forest path, his ears twitching at the sound of heavy impacts echoing through the trees. The ground tremors slightly, leading him to suspect that two massive creatures are locked in a territorial struggle just ahead. Reaching for the hilt of his blade, he decides that such a commotion so close to the main road cannot be ignored. He must investigate the source of the disturbance to ensure the path remains safe for travelers. He moves swiftly through the dense undergrowth, the foliage blurring past as he closes the distance toward the sounds of the clash. Emerging into a clearing, he witnesses a great boar and a rock python engaged in a vicious battle. He quickly assesses the situation, recognizing both as prime sources of high-quality materials and delicious meat, wondering which would make for a better meal. Steeling his resolve, he crouches low and activates his physical enhancement magic, feeling a surge of power course through his limbs. With a sharp metallic ring, he draws his sword, ready to intervene. The two beasts remain oblivious to his presence, the python scales scraping against the earth as the boar lets out a guttural roar, their primal struggle reaching a fever pitch. Seizing the moment, the young warrior leaps high into the air, his blade catching the light as he descends with a powerful, calculated strike aimed at the serpent. His edge bites deep, and with a sickening thud, the python's massive head is separated from its body, the creature's life force vanishing instantly as it collapses into the dirt. The great boar, now deprived of its rival, immediately shifts its aggression toward the new intruder, charging forward with its lethal tusks lowered. He meets the beast's gaze, his own blade already moving in a fluid arc to meet the charge. Moments later, the clearing falls silent as the second beast joins the first on the forest floor. He stands amidst the fallen giants, the immediate threat neutralized and a bountiful harvest of resources laid out before him. He exhales a long, weary breath, the adrenaline of the battle finally beginning to recede as he sheaths his blade. With the immediate danger gone, he turns his attention to the massive spoils of his victory, invoking his storage magic to absorb the heavy carcasses into his dimensional inventory. Once the clearing is empty, his gaze drifts toward a nearby carriage, its presence a stark reminder that others might have been caught in the crossfire of the monster's territorial dispute. Approaching the silent vehicle, he peers into the shadowed interior, calling out to see if a driver or passenger remains hidden within. Finding no one inside, he decides to scour the immediate forest, hoping that whoever was traveling with the carriage managed to flee into the brush for safety. His search quickly leads him to a small figure slumped against a tree. It is a young traveler, unconscious but fortunately still breathing, likely tossed aside during the initial chaos. After carefully moving the youth into the safety of the carriage, he turns to the horse still hitched to the front, offering a gentle, steadying hand to the frightened animal. He speaks softly to the beast, asking if it still has the strength to pull the heavy load, and is met with a spirited whinny that suggests the animal is ready to move. Taking the reins, he guides the carriage away from the site of the struggle, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on the dirt road marking their slow journey towards safety. The peace is eventually broken when the young passenger bolts upright in the back, shouting in a panic about lost goods and terrifying monsters, only to be met by his calm, reassuring presence. He stares in disbelief as the young man explains he is merely a traveler who happened upon the scene. The boy clarifies that the monsters have been dealt with and the scattered cargo is being managed as they head toward Beeman. Because of this revelation, the youth's eyes widen in shock, questioning if this lone traveler truly defeated the formidable great boar and rock python single-handedly. The warrior simply nods, dismissing the feat as nothing extraordinary. Moments later, the conversation shifts to their destination, with the traveler confirming they are indeed on the path to Beeman. Overwhelmed with relief, the youth offers a sincere word of thanks for the timely intervention. As he attempts to shift his weight, a sharp cry of pain escapes his lips. The traveler observes that the impact of the carriage overturning must have caused more damage than initially apparent. In response, the warrior produces a small vial, urging the injured youth to consume the healing potion within to mend his wounds. He cautiously drinks the liquid, and the magical properties take effect almost instantly, soothing the ache. Feeling a sense of shame for his helplessness, the youth bows his head in a humble apology for the trouble caused. After regaining some strength, he introduces himself as Kilshi, explaining that he assists with his family's business in Beeman. He insists on the traveler visiting their shop so he can properly repay the debt, though the warrior insists such a reward is unnecessary. The traveler then mentions that the potion was a simple concoction he brewed himself from local herbs. This news leaves Kilshi stunned, his mind racing at the thought of someone possessing the skill to craft such effective medicine from common plants. He continues to marvel at the vial, struggling to reconcile the idea of a homemade remedy being so potent. Suddenly, his demeanor shifts from gratitude to professional excitement, as he practically begs the traveler to visit the shop to discuss a potential business arrangement. The warrior can only watch, slightly taken aback by the youth's sudden burst of entrepreneurial energy. The carriage rattles along the cobblestone streets as they enter the town. The merchant Kaido saved is eager to discuss a business proposition, having realized that the young man is a capable adventurer with much to offer. As they ride, the young boy Kilshi looks up at him, curious about where a seasoned traveler might rest his head, asking if he plans to stay at a local inn for the night. He shakes his head, explaining that he actually has a home established in the depths of the nearby forest. The revelation leaves the boy wide-eyed with disbelief, wondering how anyone could live in such a place. Kilshi warns him of the dangers lurking in the woods, but Kaido reassures him, mentioning the monster-repelling fences he has installed to keep his home safe. Their conversation shifts back to the merchant's interest in potions, a topic that seems to weigh heavily on the boy's mind as he listens intently. The youth explains the dire situation in Beeman. The elderly woman who ran the local apothecary finally retired and closed her shop, leaving the entire village without a steady or reliable supply of medicine. Because of this, they have been forced to import potions from a neighboring town, but the high transport costs and limited stock have made them prohibitively expensive and scarce for the common folk. Seeing an opportunity to help, Kaido suggests he might be able to provide a solution, provided the terms of the arrangement are fair. Kilsh's face lights up with hope, just as the carriage pulls up to their final destination. The shop stands quiet in the evening air as they arrive. Kilshi calls out a greeting to the interior, his voice echoing through the warm lights spilling from the storefront windows. His sister emerges to greet him, her relief evident despite her gentle scolding for his lateness. Kilshi quickly introduces his companion, explaining how the adventurer Grand saved him from danger and saw him safely home to their doorstep. She introduces herself as Alicia, Kilsh's older sister, and expresses her profound gratitude for the help he provided. He remains humble, explaining that he simply happened to be passing by when he saw the trouble unfolding and felt compelled to intervene. The younger girl explains that her masculine attire is a necessary precaution for when she must travel alone to gather supplies. She then asks him to wait inside the shop for a moment while she begins the task of unloading their heavy cargo. Alicia agrees that they should close the shop for the day and invites him to wait in the reception room, as she has much to discuss with him. He, however, insists on helping with the unloading, pointing out that such strenuous labor is far too much for a young woman to handle on her own. Once they are settled inside, she offers a sincere apology for putting him to work so soon after his arrival. He waves off her concerns with a light-hearted smile, assuring her that as an adventurer, he takes pride in his physical strength and is more than happy to assist. She takes a moment to formally thank him once more, noting how much of a handful her younger sister can be and how relieved she is that he was there to protect her. The atmosphere in the room softens as they share a quiet moment of mutual respect. The conversation shifts toward the matter of a proper reward for his deeds. She offers him a choice, suggesting either a direct payment in coin or perhaps something from the shop's inventory that might catch his eye. He admits that he is still relatively new to this region, and while he has already registered with the Merchant Guild, he has yet to decide on a specific direction for his own business ventures. Instead of a simple reward, he proposes a more long-term arrangement. He mentions his original plan to set up a stall at the bazaar, but asks if it might be possible to rent a small corner of their shop for consignment sales instead. The sisters are visibly taken aback by the unexpected proposal. He quickly clarifies his intent, explaining that he wishes to supply the very potions they had been discussing earlier, filling the void left by the town's shortage. Alicia's surprise turns to excitement as she realizes the potential of his offer. She suggests that rather than mere consignment, they would prefer to buy his potions in bulk to stock their shelves, though he still hopes to secure a small space for other items he might wish to sell in the future. He explains his situation, admitting that while he has considered opening a stall, he has never engaged in formal commerce before. Alicia listens intently, her expression softening as she considers the proposal, while Kylshi watches the exchange with quiet interest. Curious about his capabilities, she asks if he is truly the one who manufactures the potions. He confirms this with a simple nod, reinforcing the idea that his skills extend beyond mere adventuring. The revelation that he can produce high-grade potions leaves her momentarily stunned. She breaks into a light-hearted laugh, finding it hard to believe that an adventurer possesses the refined skills typically reserved for master pharmacists. To prove his claim, he produces an array of vials, each filled with shimmering liquids of various colors. She immediately puts her appraisal skill to use, her eyes widening as she examines the high potions, mana potions, and specialized cures laid out before her. She is genuinely impressed, noting that the quality of these concoctions far surpasses the stock she usually sources from the neighboring town's apothecary. Seeing her sister's reaction, Kylshi eagerly urges her to establish a formal business partnership with him. She agrees to the proposal, though she adds a realistic caveat. While they cannot handle massive wholesale quantities, they are more than willing to facilitate sales within their capacity. He listens, acknowledging the practical limits of their small-scale operation. He then offers his own insight into the local market, explaining that while high-grade potions are impressive, the demand for them is limited by the lack of powerful monsters in the area. Instead, he suggests focusing on standard healing potions and low-grade antidotes for common venom, which are in much higher demand among the local populace. Satisfied with the direction of the conversation, she instructs Kylshi to fetch the necessary contract documents. The youth jumps up with a cheerful response, happy to see the deal moving forward. With the preliminary agreement reached, her gaze turns sharp and professional. She suggests they sit down and meticulously work through the specific figures and terms of their arrangement. As night falls over the quiet settlement, the lights of the small house continue to burn, marking the beginning of a new and promising venture. She had left him to his work, and now the young alchemist stood alone in the quiet shop. He observed the space, noting that in a place like Beeman, the demand for potions came more from the local residents than from passing adventurers. Because of this local need, he focused his efforts on creating affordable, moderately effective healing drafts. He stirred a large ceramic pot, knowing that these common remedies were in much higher demand than expensive, high-tier elixirs. He understood that this preference was largely due to the surrounding environment, where powerful monsters were a rarity. In such a peaceful region, the villagers had little use for the potent potions favored by high-level warriors, preferring instead the cheaper alternatives that suited their daily lives. With this market in mind, he gathered his supplies, prioritizing cost efficiency while still aiming for the highest possible quality. On his workbench lay a variety of fresh herbs, ready to be processed into the next batch of medicine. The young man rolled up his sleeves with a cheerful hum, his mind focused on the task ahead. He felt a surge of motivation, eager to refine his craft and provide for the community that had welcomed him. He carefully selected his ingredients, yarrow, mallow, and nazagusa, all known for their healing properties. To these, he added a sunstone, a catalyst that would significantly amplify the mana within the mixture. Invoking his specialized skills, he began the process of decomposition. He understood that the precision of this breakdown was entirely dependent on his own skill level, and that more complex materials would prove far more difficult to master. Once the materials were prepared, he transferred them to a mortar and pestle. He began the rhythmic task of grinding them into a smooth paste, all while steadily infusing the mixture with his own mana. He then added this potent paste to a pot of water drawn from a magic stone. Though his body was unable to cast spells directly, he possessed a natural talent for channeling mana into physical objects, and he stirred the simmering liquid carefully to ensure the energy was distributed evenly. After boiling the concoction for a full hour, he allowed it to cool before carefully decanting the finished product. He filled several small glass vials, completing a fresh supply of potions ready for the shop's shelves. He examines the results of his labor, noting that the quality of the healing potions has reached a superior grade. His mind drifts to his growing proficiency, observing that his alchemy has reached level 75 and his cooking level 60. He realizes that with the right mana control, even higher quality items are within his reach. With the potions secured, he turns his attention to the ingredients gathered from their recent travels, including the remains of a rock python. He begins to organize his workspace, preparing to transform these raw materials into something more substantial. His gaze lingers on the thick cuts of python meat, and a culinary inspiration strikes. He decides that a simple fry would be the best way to utilize the tender portions of the creature. As he begins to slice the meat into uniform pieces, he explains to his young companion that despite the creature's intimidating size, its flesh is remarkably free of troublesome bones. The youth watches with wide-eyed fascination, surprised by the ease with which he handles the task. He meticulously seasons the prepared strips, dusting them with a fragrant blend of salt, pepper, and thyme to enhance the natural flavors of the meat. Moving to the next stage, he prepares a batter by whisking together flour and eggs, but then adds a surprising twist, a generous splash of ale. He knows the carbonation will ensure the coating is light and exceptionally crisp once fried. Noticing a few patemo nearby, he decides they would make the perfect accompaniment to the main dish. He quickly rinses and chops the tubers into manageable chunks, all while keeping a close eye on the pan as the oil begins to shimmer and reach the ideal temperature. One by one, he coats the ingredients in the thick batter and gently lowers them into the bubbling oil. He monitors the sizzle closely, satisfied that the heat is just right for a perfect golden finish. Watching the oil bubble, he breathes in the irresistible aroma as the fritters turn a deep, appetizing brown. He can hardly wait to sample the results, imagining how well the savory, crunchy morsels will pair with a cold drink. He carefully plates the golden brown morsels, completing his take on a classic dish. Fish and chips, though the fish is actually the rock python he recently hunted. The steam rises from the freshly fried meat, which is served alongside a side of dipping sauce and a cold drink. Taking a piece with his utensils, he blows on the piping hot meat before tentatively taking a bite. The heat is intense, but the aroma is far too tempting to wait any longer. The flavor is a revelation, possessing a light, fish-like quality, but with the satisfying firmness of meat and a rich, savory juice that lingers on the tongue. He is genuinely impressed by how well the simple seasoning and the ale-based batter complement the natural flavors of the monster meat. To complete the experience, he splashes a bit of vinegar over the remaining pieces and takes a long draught of ale, finding the combination absolutely perfect. The sharp tang of the vinegar cuts through the richness of the fried coating, making for a truly satisfying meal. As he finishes his dinner, a sudden thought strikes him. He realizes he should make use of the remaining time to finalize the potions he promised to deliver. The following morning, the young traveler is greeted warmly by Kilshi as he steps out into the crisp air near their home. The youth seems eager to start the day. He informs the youth that the potions are already complete, a feat that leaves Kilshi wide-eyed with disbelief at such a rapid turnaround. He suggests they head inside the shop to verify the quality of the batch together. Upon entering the shop, he offers a polite greeting to Alicia, who is already busy with the morning's preparations behind the counter. He presents the finished potions to her, explaining that he brought them for her inspection as promised. Alicia is stunned, not just by the speed of his work, but by the exceptional quality of the brew. She notes that having such high-grade stock will be a massive help to their business, especially since the ingredients were sourced locally. She estimates that this supply should last them about a week, prompting him to promise a return with a similar quantity in 7 days' time to keep their shelves stocked. He stands patiently at the counter as Alicia instructs Kilshi to prepare for the shop's opening. She asks him to wait a moment while she settles the payment for his recent delivery of potions. While waiting, he reveals a bowl of freshly prepared food, explaining that his storage skill allowed him to keep the snake and chips perfectly hot. He offers it as a gift, mentioning he just finished making it using the leftovers from his hunt. The young Kilshi takes a bite, his eyes widening in pure delight as the savory flavor hits him. He can't help but exclaim how delicious it is, his face lighting up with joy. Seeing the boy's reaction, Alicia looks hesitant, asking if it is truly all right for them to accept such a treat. He warmly encourages her to try some as well, assuring her there is plenty to share. She takes a taste and is immediately struck by the quality, praising his unexpected culinary talent. Kilshi, still chewing, asks with curiosity if the tender meat is a type of fish. He corrects the boy, revealing the secret ingredient is actually rock python. Kilshi is stunned, having never imagined that a snake could taste so much like high-quality fish, and he reflects on how much he enjoyed it. The young alchemist explains that he used the portions of the python not required for his potions, and even he was surprised by how much better the dish turned out than he had initially imagined. Shifting back to business, he inquires if the shop has any large pots or small vials suitable for potion making currently in stock, as he looks to expand his production. Kilshi eagerly presents a sturdy ceramic pot, insisting on giving him a discount as thanks for the wonderful meal. Alicia smiles and agrees, confirming that they will certainly look after him in all his future dealings. As the sun shines on the quiet shop, the traveler reflects on his journey. Though he arrived in this land with nothing and no connections, he has already found a place where he belongs and friends to share a meal with. Kaido ventures deep into the untamed forest, a place where even the local residents and seasoned adventurers rarely tread. He observes the dense, shadowy foliage, noting the complete lack of information regarding what might be lurking within these woods. He begins his work by harvesting various plants, finding the area to be a hidden treasure trove for botanical materials. While it may not be a lucrative spot for hunting monsters, the abundance of rare herbs makes the trek worthwhile for his purposes. Suddenly, he comes face to face with a majestic unicorn, its white coat shimmering against the forest backdrop. Despite its ethereal beauty, he is well aware of the creature's aggressive nature and its tendency to violently charge at anyone who dares to approach. The beast lunges with terrifying speed, but he is prepared for the assault. With a calculated movement, he sidesteps the charge and delivers a precise strike, snapping the creature's singular horn clean off in a single, fluid motion. As the creature retreats, now resembling nothing more than an ordinary white horse, he rests nearby to catch his breath. He contemplates the nature of the beast, knowing it will remain in this mundane state until its magical horn eventually regenerates. He examines his prize, a shimmering horn of exceptional quality that radiates a faint magical aura. An appraisal confirms its S+ rarity, and he realizes the immense value of such a find, which can be processed into high-level potions or used to enhance powerful equipment. With the day's work proving exceptionally fruitful, he takes a moment to appreciate the serene mountain view. He decides that the beautiful scenery and the successful harvest make this the perfect time for a well-deserved rest. He spends his break preparing a simple meal, skillfully slicing ingredients with his knife before enjoying the food. The quiet satisfaction of the meal brings a small smile to his face as he hums a light tune, content with the day's progress. He was startled by the sudden appearance of the creature, realizing his senses were still dull if it could sneak up on him while he ate. He reflected on his own inexperience, noting that he hadn't even sensed its presence until it was right beside him. Seeing the creature's interest in his meal, he broke off a piece and offered it, asking if it wanted a taste of his food. The beast accepted the offering with surprising gusto, munching away so closely that he found it difficult to finish his own portion, though he watched with an amused smile. Once the morsel was gone, the creature nudged him for more, but he had to explain that his supplies were exhausted and there was nothing left to share. His gaze drifted to the spot where the horn had been, and he asked with genuine concern if the creature was in pain, even offering to apply a healing potion to the wound left behind. In response, the creature suddenly recoiled, its body tensing as it prepared to depart from the clearing. With a sharp cry, it turned away from him, the sudden movement catching him off guard as it bolted into the trees. He watched in silence as the mysterious beast vanished into the thicket, leaving him to wonder if he had just encountered a guardian of the woods or some legendary lord of the forest. Turning his attention back to his prize, he examined the chamois horn, realizing it wasn't from a common sorrow, but was a far more valuable material perfect for high-grade potions, leaving him deeply satisfied with his successful excursion. Meanwhile, in a quieter moment of labor, the young man swung his axe with a steady rhythm, his thoughts already turning toward the potions he would soon craft and deliver to Kill's shop. He swings a heavy hoe into the dark soil, methodically tilling his field under the warmth of the midday sun. Wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead, he pauses to admire the progress of his labor, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction in the honest work. Seeking a moment of respite, he rests near his storage shed, contemplating how much he has come to appreciate the quiet rhythm of this self-sufficient lifestyle. His attention soon shifts to the bounty of his recent hunts, specifically a large cut of great boar thigh that he intends to preserve as smoked ham. He sets to work in the kitchen, slicing the meat into uniform pieces before thoroughly massaging a blend of salt, sugar, and aromatic herbs into the flesh to begin the curing process. While such a process would normally require weeks of patience, he realizes he can utilize his storage skill to artificially accelerate the passage of time for the ingredients. Once the accelerated curing is complete, he carefully rinses the excess salt from the meat in a barrel of cool water, preparing it for the final stage. He then hangs the seasoned slabs to dry before placing them in the smoker for several hours, noting how his unique abilities simplify even the most time-consuming tasks. With the ham safely smoking, he begins preparing a separate dinner of black buffalo tongue, gathering fresh vegetables and red wine to create a rich, savory base. He carefully boils the meat to tenderness before slowly sautéing diced onions in butter and garlic, the kitchen filling with a mouth-watering aroma as the mixture turns a perfect golden brown. He leans over the pot, the savory scent of garlic and oil rising to meet him. It is a promising start to the meal, the aroma already whetting his appetite. Once the onions have reached a deep, golden brown, he carefully adds peeled tomatoes, crushing them into the mixture as they begin to soften and release their juices. To deepen the flavor, he pours in a generous splash of red wine, letting the liquid come to a gentle boil while he prepares the next ingredients. The seared black buffalo tongue and a handful of mushrooms are then submerged into the rich base. He lowers the heat, allowing the stew to simmer slowly, the flavors melding together over time. While the pot bubbles, he checks on the meat he has been aging within his storage, noting that the process is nearly complete. His attention is suddenly drawn outside, where the majestic white beast from the forest has reappeared. The creature has not come empty-handed. It presents a massive carcass accompanied by a variety of aromatic herbs like cardamom, cumin, and turmeric. He marvels at the beast's ability to gather such high-quality ingredients, wondering if it possesses a storage ability of its own. It becomes clear that the visitor is offering these gifts in exchange for a prepared meal. He reflects on his own solitude and decides that sharing a dinner would be a welcome change. With the black buffalo tongue stew finally finished, he serves a portion for his guest. He explains that in his original world, it is customary to show gratitude for the life given to provide the meal, a sentiment the beast seems to acknowledge. The forest lord begins to eat with surprising gusto, clearly enjoying the rich, savory dish. He encourages his new companion to eat as much as it likes, noting that there is plenty of food to go around. Taking a bite for himself, he is struck by the incredible depth of flavor and the tenderness of the meat. It is a culinary success, made even better by the unexpected company. He takes a slow, deliberate bite of the stew, savoring the way the slow-cooked buffalo tongue practically melts on his tongue. The sharp acidity of the tomatoes has mellowed into a deep sweetness, perfectly complementing the rich, savory essence of the meat. Without the crutch of bouillon or demi-glace, the pure, unadulterated flavors of the forest's bounty take center stage. Across the table, his unusual guest is equally engrossed in the meal, lapping up the broth with rhythmic efficiency. He can't help but let out a satisfied exclamation, the sheer quality of the dish exceeding even his own high expectations. As the two of them share the quiet meal under a swirling, star-dusted sky, a sense of peace settles over the clearing. He reflects on the strange turn of events, realizing that despite his companion being a creature of the wild, the simple act of sharing a table makes the solitary forest feel a little less lonely. The remnants of their feast sit atop the wooden table, the heavy iron pot still radiating a faint warmth into the cool night air. Sensing the meal needs a proper conclusion, he reaches for a bottle of wine and suggests a toast. He tells the beast to wait just a moment longer while he prepares a few additional snacks to accompany the drink. He then turns his attention to a large slab of cured meat, carefully drawing a sharp blade across its surface to produce thin, translucent ribbons. While he is pleased with the visual presentation of this first attempt at great boar prosciutto, he knows the true test lies in the complexity of its flavor. With the platter prepared and the wine poured, he presents the spread to his guest with a flourish. He invites the creature to try the pairing, then takes a piece for himself, his eyes widening as the intense, salty richness of the cured boar hits his palate. The beast makes quick work of the offering, its powerful jaws moving in a steady rhythm as it enjoys the new texture. He watches with a smile, taking a long, appreciative sip of the dark wine, the vintage's bold notes cutting through the richness of the meat. In a moment of playful camaraderie, he tosses a small morsel into the air, watching as the lord of the forest snaps it up with practiced grace. The creature lets out a soft, satisfied sound, its eyes reflecting the warmth of the nearby fire. He leans back, glass in hand, content in the knowledge that a good meal can bridge the gap between even the most disparate of souls. He finishes the evening by sharing a final drink with his new companion under the vast, starlit sky. By the next morning, the young adventurer is already busy in the kitchen, the sizzle of a frying pan filling the air as he prepares a fresh meal. A sudden knock at the door interrupts his work, prompting him to wonder if the lord of the forest has returned so soon. Upon opening the door, he is greeted not by a beast, but by a woman clad in a dark, crested cloak who offers a playful smile. He stares at her in disbelief as she boldly announces her arrival for breakfast, forcing him to remind her that his home is not a public restaurant. Ignoring his protest, she drops a heavy, bulging sack onto the floor with a resounding thud, claiming to have found something he has been searching for. The youth peers into the bag, his eyes widening in pure shock at the sight of the treasure she has brought. It is a massive hoard of white rice, a rare find that leaves him stammering in confusion while she casually reminds him that she has yet to eat. Recognizing the incredible value of her gift, he immediately softens his stance and invites her in to share the breakfast he has just finished cooking. As she steps across the threshold, he decides that while the mystery of the rice is important, his growling stomach must take priority for now. Inside a cozy home, the young boy sits across from a light-haired traveler, their meal spread out before them. He pauses, a piece of bread in hand, to ask where she managed to acquire such rare rice. She casually reveals that she found it while exploring a dungeon, much to his surprise. She continues her explanation, recalling how she opened a treasure chest only to find it stuffed with a large hemp sack. Inside was the very grain they were now eating, a find she hadn't initially realized was edible until she remembered his search for such ingredients. He stares at her in disbelief, his mind racing at the thought of a place where treasure chests hold food instead of gold. She adds that the entire dungeon was a bounty of resources, filled with monsters that were, surprisingly, all quite delicious. This mysterious place contains a vast aquatic region known as the Sea Layer, a shimmering expanse where rare spices can be harvested. It is also a primary source of salt, making it a literal goldmine for anyone interested in the culinary arts. Despite its riches, she explains that the conquest of the dungeon has hit a standstill at this very layer. Without a proper ship to navigate the deep waters, adventurers are unable to push further into the unknown depths. She notes that while spatial magic could theoretically solve the transport issue, the sheer cost of moving supplies and building a port makes it a logistical nightmare. He, however, is less concerned with logistics and more horrified by the thought of so much potential food being left to rot or go ignored by others. Driven by a new purpose, he leans forward and asks for the exact location of this culinary paradise. She looks back at him with a hint of amusement, noting that his fixation on food is truly unusual compared to the typical adventurer. The location is revealed to be far to the east, situated near the bustling town of Orda Botanico. It lies within the territory of the Margrave of Orda, a significant distance from their current quiet life. She offers to whisk him there instantly, using her teleportation magic, but he politely declines the invitation. He decides that for now, it is better to focus on establishing a firm foundation for his life here before chasing after the wonders of a distant dungeon. He sits across from his companion, who expresses a lingering disappointment that they couldn't explore the dungeon together as planned. The traveler mentions a keen interest in the legendary ingredient dungeon once the current situation stabilizes, before shifting the conversation to the high-quality rice he has managed to acquire. He watches as she leans forward, lamenting how he vanished from the capital while she was away, despite the time they spent together as party members. He can only offer a silent, awkward grimace in response to her pointed accusations of abandonment. She continues her critique, noting that she hadn't even been informed of his intended destination, leaving him to scratch his head in genuine confusion as to how she eventually found him. She is met with his sudden, shocked demand to know exactly how she tracked him to this remote location. With a calm smile, she points out that the magic bag he carries was enchanted by her own hand, specifically designed so that only he could access its contents. He stares at the bag as she explains that the enchantment she placed on it was more than just a security measure. It was a beacon. She reveals that she added a locator spell to the item to ensure that if the clumsy youth ever lost the bag, or himself, she would always be able to find him. She casually enjoys her meal while dismissing his loud accusations of being a stalker. Her motivation is simple and honest. She couldn't bear the thought of never eating his delicious cooking again, a reason that leaves him shouting in exasperation. She offers a generous deal after he finally sighs in resignation, asking if she is willing to sell him some of the rice she mentioned. Instead of a price, she promises to give it to him for free, smiling as she explains that she intends to come over and eat his meals anyway. He joins her in finishing the meal as the quiet of the house settles around them. She casually mentions that since she has now memorized the location, she can simply use teleportation magic to drop by whenever the craving for his food strikes. They discuss the future of their arrangement until she suggests a more permanent solution, noting that she would love to have fresh fish while staying in the mountains. She asks if there is a spare room in the house she could rent, promising to pay her fair share of the expenses. Their previous night's discussion is forgotten as he steps outside the next morning, frozen by a sight that leaves him utterly speechless. He stares in disbelief at his own dining room, which has been transformed overnight. The traveler stands casually by the table, explaining that she found the previous decor too drab and decided to rearrange things. When he asks where she even found such furniture, she remains nonchalant, treating the sudden renovation as a simple matter of course. She points toward the ornate door handle, revealing that it was a trophy taken from a bandit's hideout during a previous exploit. She adds with a smirk that the piece even carries a minor curse, though she seems entirely unbothered by the fact, viewing it more as a curiosity than a threat. Turning her attention to the kitchen, she notes that the area was quite filthy, so she took the liberty of applying a purification spell along with a preservation charm to keep things fresh. While he feels a twinge of annoyance at her unsolicited help, she insists it is merely a gesture of gratitude for the meals he provides, making it difficult for him to stay frustrated. He eventually settles at the table, pulling out a heavy bag of rice and asking if she minds waiting, as preparing it properly takes time. She gives him her blessing, and he begins to contemplate the best method for cooking the grains, noting that while boiling is an option, it isn't quite the traditional steaming method he remembers from his past. As they sit together, she leans in with a curious expression, questioning how he possesses knowledge that seems so out of place for someone in his position. He quickly improvises a cover story, claiming he learned everything from a traveling merchant who looked after him in his younger years, hoping the explanation is enough to satisfy her suspicion. He begins the preparation in earnest, pouring the grains into a bowl while silently acknowledging that he can't exactly reveal the truth about his past life's memories. The sight of high-quality, polished rice fills him with a sense of genuine excitement that he struggles to hide, his mind already racing with culinary possibilities. The young chef then moves to the sink, carefully rinsing the rice under a steady stream of water. He informs his guest that the entire process, including the necessary soaking time, will take about an hour, and she watches him with quiet anticipation, seemingly intrigued by his methodical approach. He then summons a shimmering magical interface to browse his stored ingredients, his eyes lighting up as he realizes he has both rice and soy sauce on hand. With a determined smile, he decides to prepare a classic katsudon, selecting a prime cut of great boar meat from his inventory to serve as the centerpiece of the meal. He gathers the rest of his supplies, onions, eggs, and flour, while reflecting on how this particular dish was a favorite of a former companion. As the pot begins to heat on the stove, he meticulously prepares the workspace for the multi-stage cooking process ahead, his movements fluid and confident. With practiced movements, he slices the thick boar meat, seasons it generously with salt and pepper, and dredges each piece through flour and beaten egg. Finally, he coats the cutlets in breadcrumbs before dropping them into a pan of shimmering, hot oil, where they begin to sizzle and turn a perfect golden brown, filling the room with a savory aroma. He stands over the stove, the rhythmic sizzle of hot oil filling the kitchen as he carefully fries the breaded meat. Noticing the rice has begun to boil, he reaches down to lower the flame, ensuring it simmers at just the right temperature. He breathes in the gentle scent of steaming rice mingling with the savory aroma of the frying cutlets, a combination that promises a truly satisfying meal. He waits until the meat reaches a perfect golden brown hue before lifting it from the pan, holding it steady to let the excess oil drip away. He quickly slices the crispy cutlet, the crunch of the crust echoing in the quiet room. Though tempted to take a bite, he remains focused, adding sliced onions to a simmering mixture of broth, soy sauce, and sugar. After the onions soften, he slides the meat into the pan and pours over a layer of beaten egg before covering it to let the flavors meld. Meanwhile, he prepares the bowls, eager to see the final result. He presents the steaming bowl of great boar katsudon to his guest, explaining that he made use of the ingredients found during their travels while she waited. She eagerly accepts the bowl, though the intense heat of the first bite catches her off guard, prompting him to suggest she mix the savory topping with the rice beneath. She takes another careful bite, her eyes widening as she experiences the complex blend of sweet and salty flavors, a taste entirely new and wonderful to her. Seeing her enjoyment, he finally digs into his own portion, the familiar, comforting taste confirming that his efforts in this new world have been a success. He watches with satisfaction as his companion digs into the meal, the savory tonkatsu pairing perfectly with the subtle sweetness of the rice. Because the seasoning is so unique, she finds herself captivated by the flavor, wondering about the mysterious dark liquid that has transformed the dish into something entirely foreign yet delicious. As they continue their meal, he explains that he found the ingredients by chance at a bookstore, noting that they likely originated from a distant land to the east. The young chef goes on to describe how, with a steady supply of soy sauce and miso, his culinary repertoire would expand significantly, a prospect that clearly intrigues his guest. In response to her curiosity, he mentions that the merchant who sold him the items spoke of a place called Sarandal, located at the far eastern edge of the continent. While she considers the vast distance, she realizes that with her mastery of teleportation magic, a journey to the eastern borders might not be as impossible as it seems. Seeing her deep in thought, he asks if she could truly procure more of these rare seasonings, to which she confidently declares that he should leave the task to her. The traveler, now identified as Abel, prepares to depart, leaving him struck by her sudden enthusiasm and the incredible luck of having met such a capable ally. He promises that in exchange for the soy sauce and miso, he will dedicate himself to preparing the most delicious meals she has ever tasted, a vow she accepts with a determined smile. Looking down at their empty bowls, he reflects on the immense value of a friend who possesses such extraordinary magical abilities, realizing his culinary journey has only just begun. The young adventurer expertly carves through the thick hide of a green drake, noting that despite its size, this particular specimen is relatively small. He reflects on how easily such a task comes to him, even as he prepares the creature for processing, mentioning that a green drake is usually considered a minor catch in the grand scheme of things, though it will still take some time to finish. He stands before a massive pile of carcasses, explaining to his companions that these will serve as payment for their lodging and food. The haul is impressive, consisting of several high-level monsters he encountered during his brief outing, which he presents with a casual air of accomplishment. Among the remains lie a giant rock bird and a black buffalo, with the green drake added as an unexpected bonus to the collection. Each creature represents a significant amount of rare materials and sustenance for the group. Seeing the scale of the hunt, the armored woman crosses her arms, questioning just how far he traveled on what he claimed was a simple walk. He begins to store the items away into his magical storage, maintaining a calm demeanor despite her growing suspicion about his activities. He explains that he had ventured to the base of the eastern mountains, a considerable distance from their current location. While he was initially hunting the black buffalo, the drake had suddenly appeared, forcing him to deal with it as well before returning. She remains stunned by the range of his journey, but he quickly clarifies that he utilized teleportation magic to bridge the gap. Since he had visited the area once before, the transition was simple, though his casual use of such high-level magic clearly baffles her. With a resigned sigh at his overwhelming sense of personal freedom and lack of restraint, she decides to leave the arduous task of butchering the remaining creatures in his capable hands. He watches her depart, ready to begin the meticulous work alone. He sets to work on a massive slab of meat, acknowledging that while the quality of the harvest is exceptional, the sheer volume of it is quite a lot to handle. After a period of intense labor, he wipes the sweat from his forehead with a satisfied smile, the difficult task finally complete. The results of his labor are laid out in detail: horns and claws for equipment, blood and organs for potent potions, and large magic stones. For a dragonkin, every part is a treasure, and nothing is allowed to go to waste, as even the meat is of the highest quality. He surveys the impressive haul spread before him, calculating the various items he can craft from the dragon scales, meat, and other rare materials he gathered during his excursion. Having set out to explore the surrounding wilderness, Kairu takes a moment to rest on a mossy rock, meticulously updating his hand-drawn map. He reflects on how recording the locations of resources and monster habitats is essential for any adventurer, especially since his innate search skill allows him to perceive the surrounding terrain with unusual clarity, making the task of cartography much more efficient. As he ventures deeper into the sprawling forest, he observes that while the local guild provides maps for common routes, the sheer scale of this ancient woodland remains largely undocumented. Beside him, the small, horned creature Lulu keeps pace as they navigate the dense undergrowth and rocky paths. Reaching a serene lakeside, the young adventurer pauses to add the landmark to his parchment, recognizing it as the place where he previously encountered a unicorn. He notes with some relief that no particularly dangerous beasts have crossed his path so far, allowing him to focus entirely on his mapping. Standing in a quiet clearing, he checks the time and realizes that his careful mapping has turned what would be a short walk into a 90-minute trek. He considers this spot an ideal location for a temporary base of operations during his future excursions into the deeper woods. Despite the time, he decides to push just a little further into the shadows of the trees, carefully marking his trail to ensure he can find his way back to the clearing if the path becomes obscured by the dense canopy. A sense of excitement builds within him as he wonders what other treasures might be hidden in the heart of the woods, perhaps even rarer herbs or monsters carrying even more valuable materials. He acknowledges to himself that he might be acting a bit recklessly by venturing so deep alone with such a casual attitude, but the allure of discovery is too strong to ignore. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere is shattered by a violent rustling in the canopy above, followed by a sharp, aggressive sound that echoes through the trees. Before he can even draw his weapon, a blur of motion erupts from the foliage, forcing him to throw himself backward in a desperate attempt to evade the sudden, high-speed assault. He reacts instantly as thick, whip-like vines lash out from the dense foliage. With practiced ease, he twists his body and parries the sudden strikes, his blade ringing against the wood-hard appendages. Having fended off the initial assault, he finds himself standing before a Trent Veloce, a predatory tree-like monster. He recalls that while these sea-rank creatures are common in the deep woods, they are notorious for their ability to blend perfectly into the environment. The young adventurer tightens his grip on his sword, realizing he has unwittingly wandered into a concentrated nest of these camouflage predators. They are masters of erasing their presence, making it all too easy for an unwary traveler to be surrounded before they even notice the danger. As he scans the perimeter, he notes that this is the reality of the deep forest, a place where human footsteps rarely fall and the environment itself is hostile. Perched on his shoulder, his small companion Lulu watches the shifting shadows with wide, alert eyes. He reflects on how he was lured into this trap by the sheer abundance of rare medicinal herbs growing in the clearing. His focus on the harvest had blinded him to the subtle signs of the ambush until it was nearly too late. Facing down a particularly large specimen, He acknowledges that while a single Trent Veloce poses little threat to a seasoned fighter, their strength lies in their numbers. Being swarmed by a dozen of them at once is a far more perilous situation. The situation escalates as other forest denizens, drawn by the commotion, begin to emerge from the undergrowth. Slithering shapes and glowing eyes appear between the trunks, adding to the growing circle of enemies. Recognizing that a prolonged battle would be foolish, he decides that survival must take precedence over pride. With a sharp exhale, he pivots on his heel, choosing a gap in the closing circle to make a break for it. He plunges into the thicket, his feet pounding against the mossy earth as he outruns the grasping vines. The forest blurs around him into a tunnel of green and gray as he puts distance between himself and the ambush site. Finally reaching a calmer part of the woods, he slows to a halt to catch his breath and assess his surroundings. Though he has lost his original path in the chaos, he reasons that finding the river will eventually lead him back to familiar territory. He stands amidst the towering trunks, struck by the sheer scale of the woodland. Realizing the depth of his predicament, he reasons that following the river downstream is his best chance of finding an exit, though the upstream path leads deeper into the unknown. Looking out over the horizon, he observes how the foliage becomes increasingly dense and the trees grow to impossible heights as they recede into the heart of the forest. This oppressive atmosphere weighs on him, making the environment feel like a realm that actively rejects human presence, a pure world of nature where he is but a trespasser. Suddenly, a rustle in the undergrowth breaks his contemplation, and he tenses, only to find the familiar, majestic form of the white deer emerging from the shadows. He is relieved to see the creature, marveling that it lives so deep within these woods, and as it begins to lead the way, he gratefully follows, promising a grand meal in exchange for the guidance. Their journey leads them back to the safety of a secluded dwelling, where he is warmly greeted by the elven woman, to whom he announces his return while inquiring about their companion's whereabouts. She informs him that she has taken the liberty of reinforcing the monster-repelling charms around the perimeter, even adding a layer of protection to ensure that only he and their friend can pass through the gates. This news catches him off guard, as he notes that monsters often seem drawn to him for food, but she remains firm in her decision to bolster their defenses against the increasingly aggressive wildlife. She then playfully teases him, suggesting that his habit of befriending forest beasts is merely a symptom of his loneliness as a man living in isolation, a comment he dismisses with a sharp retort. Putting the banter aside, he heads toward the kitchen to begin preparing their evening meal, asking her to wait just a little longer while the deer settles in nearby. Marina and the majestic deer stand in a quiet moment of anticipation, watching the preparations unfold. He decides to make use of the green drake meat for today's menu. Gathering the rest of his supplies, great boar meat, homemade bacon, onions, and cabbage, he prepares to start the culinary process. The work begins with the cabbage, its leaves carefully peeled and boiled until tender before being drained. In another pot, finely chopped onions sizzle in melting butter, cooking until they turn a perfect, translucent gold. He then turns his attention to the green drake meat, mincing the tough, beef-like protein into a fine grind. This is combined with the boar meat, the sautéed onions, eggs, and breadcrumbs, all seasoned with a precise blend of salt, pepper, and a dash of nutmeg. With practiced hands, he shapes the mixture into uniform rounds, wrapping each one tightly in a softened cabbage leaf and securing the bundle with a strip of bacon. While he considered a tomato base, he ultimately chooses to simmer them in a light, savory vegetable broth today. As the pot bubbles, he leans over to check the progress, adding a final pinch of salt and pepper to perfect the seasoning. Realizing the meal is nearly finished, he calls out for help with the plates, prompting a question from Marina about whether they will dine outdoors. He confirms this, noting that their large, antlered guests simply wouldn't fit comfortably inside the house. Moments later, he carries the steaming pot out to the clearing where the table has been set for the group. The lid is lifted to reveal the dragon cabbage rolls, their rich aroma filling the air and promising a hearty feast. He explains the unique choice of ingredients, proud of how the drake meat has been transformed into something so appetizing. With everything in place, the trio offers a word of thanks before diving into the meal, the great forest spirit joining them at the table for this moment of shared warmth. He gazes at the steaming dish, the rich aroma of the meat and juices wafting up to greet him. Without hesitation, he digs in, the sound of his enthusiastic eating filling the quiet air. Closing his eyes, the young man savors the first bite, a look of pure satisfaction washing over his face. He marvels at the quality of the green drake meat. Despite being minced, it retains a satisfyingly firm texture and a punchy flavor. He considers how the addition of the cabbage has mellowed the taste, making it incredibly easy to eat, and wonders what a dish made solely of the drake meat would be like. Across the table, Marina is equally impressed, her eyes wide with delight as she asks for another serving. He readily agrees, happy to see his cooking so well received. She continues to praise the meal, noting how the vegetables perfectly encase the meat to preserve every drop of its savory juice. The combination of the soup's gentle sweetness and the rich meat creates a flavor she finds impossible to stop eating. Even the majestic forest guardian, Era, is caught up in the feast, dipping its head into a bowl to enjoy the prepared monster meat. Marina observes the sight with a touch of amusement, noting that even such a creature can't resist the meal. He assures her that there is plenty more to go around, encouraging her to eat her fill. She smiles back, clearly enjoying the peaceful moment and the exceptional food. The great deer finishes its portion quickly, nudging its empty bowl forward in a silent but clear request for seconds. As the meal winds down and wine is poured, the conversation turns toward the future. Marina mentions that once her current responsibilities are concluded, she intends to follow Grand's suggestion and travel toward the eastern region of Ceylon. She explains the logistical challenges of her upcoming journey, noting that while teleportation magic can bridge the gap to familiar lands, the trek to the eastern reaches of Ceylon will require more traditional means like horses or carriages. The young man across from her reacts with genuine shock at the scale of the undertaking, his eyes wide as he processes the distance. Since she has never set foot in those distant lands, she cannot simply blink across the map, though she admits that expanding her repertoire of teleportation anchors is a tempting prospect. Eager to assist and perhaps join the venture, he insists on providing fair compensation for the travel, his face lighting up with the spirit of adventure as he gestures toward the horizon. As they stroll through the quiet village later, he ponders the nature of this payment, considering that providing consistent meals and a safe place to stay is a small price for such a journey. His mind wanders to the potential for rare materials they might encounter, imagining the high-quality equipment he could forge from the spoils of the East. He listens intently as the conversation returns to the technicalities of enchanting, where she clarifies that her skills are more of a refined hobby than a master's craft, yet she can still weave multiple enchantments into an item if the base materials are of sufficient quality. This revelation only fuels his ambition to scour high-ranked dungeons for the necessary components, his thoughts already drifting toward the exotic ingredients, especially rice, that await them in the Eastern Territories. The young man's ambitious planning is momentarily interrupted by the sound of enthusiastic eating, as the majestic white deer beside them buries its snout into a bowl with singular focus. He can't help but comment on the creature's voracious appetite, watching as it demands a second helping of the monster meat feast. Even in this new world, the young man cannot start his day without a familiar ritual. He observes the dark beverage, reflecting on how the bitter drink from his past life remains an essential part of his morning routine. He carefully measures out the dark grounds, a habit ingrained from his previous life, where a cup before work was mandatory. Standing in the quiet kitchen, he prepares the water, noting how the process itself helps clear the lingering fog of sleep from his mind. As he pours the steaming water over the filter, he muses on the nature of the drink. As a child, he never understood why adults craved something so bitter, yet somewhere along the way, he found himself unable to do without it. Closing his eyes, he breathes in the rich aroma, remembering how he would often seek out this comfort not just in the morning, but during the stressful lulls of his old job. Now seated across from his elven companion, he takes a long sip of the dark liquid. He explains to her that while he once tempered the bitterness with generous amounts of milk and sugar in his previous life, he eventually grew to appreciate the raw, unadulterated flavor of the drink served black. She peers into the cup, struck by the deep, dark hue of the brew. He clarifies that this isn't the drink from his old world, but a substitute made from the roasted roots of the popo flower, which gives it that intense color. He continues his explanation, detailing how the drink provides a mild stimulant effect and aids in stamina recovery, making it the perfect remedy for morning lethargy. She realizes he is talking about the common yellow flowers that grow everywhere and eventually turn into drifting fluff, surprised that such a simple plant could produce this. As they sit together at the table, she adds that those very flowers contain a trace of mana, which is why they are often harvested as ingredients for basic potions, though she had never heard of them being used for a beverage. Curious, she takes a tentative sip, acknowledging the bitterness he described. However, the earthy, potent aftertaste hits her with unexpected force, leaving her face contorted in a grimace as she realizes this tea is far from pleasant. Despite his offer for a second cup, she continues to struggle with the intense bitterness, her face contorted in a grimace. Seeing her distress, the young man calmly suggests that a splash of milk and a spoonful of sugar might temper the harsh flavor. Taking his advice, she mixes the ingredients and takes another sip, finding the brew significantly more tolerable, though the underlying bite of the root remains. Because of her improved reaction, he muses aloud whether such a concoction could be refined into a proper stamina potion. She counters his curiosity with professional skepticism, explaining that the popo flower's natural mana content is far too low for standard alchemy. She notes that while adding crushed magic stones might create a temporary stimulant, it is hardly a conventional practice. This theoretical mixture would act as a double-edged sword, providing a fleeting burst of energy to mask exhaustion, only to be followed by a crushing wave of fatigue once the effects wane. Furthermore, she warns that the inclusion of mineral additives could lead to toxicity if consumed too frequently. He realizes then that most people would never consider a common weed to be a viable alchemical base, a thought he shares with a sense of quiet discovery. He admits that he had never considered the potential for such a mundane plant to be marketed as a physical enhancement draft, a revelation that leaves his companion staring in disbelief. The realization that a simple, everyday plant could harbor such potent, drug-like effects leaves her completely stunned. As the conversation settles, he reflects on the possibility that the ingredients for powerful tonics might be hidden in plain sight, unnoticed by those who only look for rare components. She remains quiet, her mind clearly racing with the implications of his unconventional logic. Later that evening, having completed his duties for the guild and secured his daily quota of potion materials, he returns to his quarters with a new goal in mind. To complement his newly discovered popo brew, he decides to bake a batch of cookies, gathering flour, eggs, and butter on his workspace. He begins the process with practiced ease, first creaming the softened butter and sugar together until the mixture is light and airy. After incorporating the eggs one by one, he carefully sifts the flour into the bowl, folding the dough with a steady hand as he prepares to create a familiar comfort in this unfamiliar world. He begins by meticulously mixing the flour and water, kneading the dough until it reaches the perfect consistency before letting it rest in his magical storage. As he works, he considers the possibility of sharing his creation with his companions at the guild during his next visit. After the dough has rested, he carefully arranges the small, rectangular portions onto a baking sheet, noting that the oven, reinforced with heat-insulating bricks and powered by fire magic stones, is finally at the ideal temperature for a 15-minute bake. With a steady hand, he slides the tray into the glowing heat of the oven. Once the timer is up, he pulls the tray out, observing that while the cookies are perfectly baked, they look a bit plain. However, a sudden idea strikes him as he recalls a special ingredient he has tucked away. His mind drifts back to a recent foraging trip in the forest where, amidst the search for popo flower roots, he had discovered a patch of vibrant wild raspberries and stored them away for just such an occasion. Deciding to elevate the simple treat, he boils the berries down into a thick, fragrant jam and begins carefully dolloping the crimson preserve onto the center of each golden cookie. The result is a beautiful arrangement of butter cookies, each crowned with a glistening jewel of raspberry jam, ready to be enjoyed. He picks one up, his eyes bright with anticipation as he takes an initial bite to judge the fruits of his labor. A look of pure satisfaction washes over him as the buttery sweetness of the biscuit perfectly complements the sharp tang of the wild berries, confirming that his culinary experiment is a resounding success. Feeling energized by the snack, he stretches his arms and looks toward the window, planning to make a sweeter batch for able to pair with coffee before turning his attention to preparing his lunch and finishing the rest of his daily chores. He stood at the edge of the forest, reflecting on his routine of gathering medicinal herbs near the lake while occasionally fending off the local wildlife. While he frequently encountered monsters like the wild boars roaming the outskirts, he knew that as long as he didn't venture too deep into the woods, the threats remained manageable, allowing him to harvest plants right behind his home. Because the area was so familiar and peaceful, he allowed his guard to drop slightly, but a sudden, sharp sound behind him snapped his attention back to his surroundings as he quickly utilized his magical storage to secure his gathered materials. Before he could react to the noise, the ground beneath his feet gave way, sending him tumbling down a dark, jagged shaft until he landed hard on the cavern floor below. Shaken but uninjured, he produced a lantern to illuminate the damp passage, wondering if he had stumbled into an ant monster's nest, though the lack of any insectoid activity suggested otherwise. As he ventured deeper into the tunnel, he observed that the ambient mana was too thin for the place to be a true dungeon, making the origin of the cavern even more mysterious. He continued forward, noting the absence of any powerful presence or immediate danger lurking in the shadows. Deciding that a brief exploration was worth the risk, he adjusted his gear and prepared to see where the path led, though he felt a sudden pang of hunger. The physical exertion of the fall and the walk had stirred his appetite, drawing his focus to the hearty, minced meat cutlet sandwiches he had packed for his journey. He took a large, satisfying bite of the meal, but his moment of respite was interrupted by a sudden realization or a faint sound echoing from the darkness. He sits calmly by his small fire, the light flickering against the cavern walls. Although he feels the weight of a gaze from the shadows, he senses no malice, only curiosity. He speaks aloud to the darkness, assuring whoever is watching that he intends no harm and will move on once his meal is finished. Because of his gentle tone, a small, furry head cautiously emerges from behind a rock. The creature watches him intently, its large eyes reflecting the firelight, while several glowing stones lie scattered on the ground nearby. Seeing the creature's interest, he holds out a thick sandwich filled with meat and vegetables from the surface. He offers it as a gesture of goodwill, suggesting a trade for the interesting minerals the creature seems to possess. The creature, a member of the subterranean beastmen known as moles or war moles, steps further into the light. It sniffs the air, its curiosity piqued, and asks with a small, high-pitched voice if the traveler happens to have anything sweet. Recalling that these people are renowned for their craftsmanship with underground ores, he reaches into his pack. He mentions that while he doesn't have much, he did bake some cookies that might satisfy their craving. The small beast man tentatively reaches into the basket he provides, its tiny paws grasping one of the golden brown treats. As it takes a bite, the creature's eyes widen in pure joy. The unfamiliar sweetness of the surface world seems to overwhelm its senses in the best way possible. This display of delight draws out several more of its kin, who scramble forward with excited chirps. He can't help but chuckle as the small, fluffy group crowds around the basket, eager to taste the cookies. Seeing an opportunity for mutual benefit, he proposes a more permanent arrangement. He offers to bring more surface goods, and even takes specific requests in exchange for the rare ores and plants found only in these depths. The lead creature happily agrees, handing him a shimmering piece of ore as a token of their new friendship and a thank you for the delicious snack. He watches expectantly as the adventurer examines the eurobitite, ore on his digital display. The young man is clearly impressed, noting that the quality of the mineral is far higher than he had anticipated for such a simple trade. The young man considers the value of the exchange, realizing that the cookies he provided were a small price to pay for such a rare find. Around him, the other subterranean dwellers wait with bated breath, hoping for more treasures from the world above. He decides to offer them another gift, pulling a small pouch of pepper from his bag. As he hands it over, he cautions the leader to be careful, explaining that the spice is quite strong and could cause a sneezing fit if opened too hastily. The adventurer reflects on his good fortune, knowing he has plenty of the spice to spare after buying it in bulk at a low price. To him, it is a small gesture, but to these creatures, it is a rare and precious luxury. He then proposes a more formal arrangement, suggesting they trade regularly so he can acquire the ores and gems he needs for his magical crafts. The moles react with overwhelming joy, their cheers echoing through the cavern as they express their eagerness to continue the partnership. The young man apologizes for the limited selection he brought today, explaining that his arrival was quite unplanned. In response, the lead beastman assures him that they will have even better materials prepared for their next encounter. He introduces himself as Gran, telling them he lives in the forest directly above their home. The leader of the group smiles warmly and introduces himself as Talpa, solidifying the bond between their two peoples. The small creature reaches out to shake Gran's hand, a gesture of mutual respect and the beginning of a promising alliance. He waves a final farewell to Talpa and the others as he begins his journey back to the surface. The moles stand together, watching their new friend depart into the upper reaches of the cave system. The adventurer moves quickly, realizing that he must return home before nightfall makes the forest even more treacherous. He reflects on the danger of his earlier fall, but his thoughts are suddenly interrupted by an unexpected presence nearby. He marvels at how the great deer always appears so suddenly, without a single sound to betray its presence. It feels less like a chance encounter and more like a deliberate meeting. Continuing their walk, he explains that humans are unlikely to venture this deep into the forest to stumble upon the mole settlement. For now, his interactions remain a matter of personal trade, a quiet exchange of goods away from prying eyes. The silent guardian of the woods listens intently as the young man considers the future. While he might eventually share this secret with Abel, he decides there is no need for concern at this moment. As they traverse the dense foliage, he realizes that this creature truly is the master of the forest. Though it shows no hostility toward him, he understands that those who would despoil these woods are not welcome. He worries that if humans discovered the rich or veins where the moles reside, they might resort to force, driving the peaceful inhabitants from their homes. He looks toward his companion, reaffirming his desire to avoid sparking conflict between the different races. His goal is simple: to maintain peaceful trade and acquire the materials he needs without causing upheaval in the delicate balance of the woods. With a warm smile, he offers his thanks, admitting that the complexities of nobility and territorial rights are far too troublesome for his liking. He yearns only for a slow, quiet life. As they reach a clearing, he suggests heading back to prepare a meal, inviting the majestic beast to join them for a well-earned feast. Gran and his companion, Abel, stand before the Paxero shop. Gran explains his desire to visit his business partner, while Abel seems curious about the young man's connections in this town. Entering the establishment, they are warmly greeted by Alicia. Gran returns the greeting, introducing his friend to the shopkeeper and her young assistant who stands by her side. The introductions continue as Alicia identifies herself and her younger sister, Kirsch. Abel, standing tall in his traveling cloak, is presented as a fellow adventurer who insisted on coming along to see the shop. He offers a charming smile, introducing himself simply as Abel, a mage, and expressing his pleasure at meeting the sisters who run the local business. Shifting focus to business, Gran lays out his latest batch of supplies on the counter. He presents the standard healing and refresh potions, but highlights a new addition, a specialized ointment designed for muscle recovery and fatigue. He watches as Alicia examines the new stock with keen interest. Abel chimes in, noting that Gran's potions are highly regarded for their potency, which explains the shopkeeper's obvious enthusiasm. Reaching into his bag, he produces a small jar, offering it to Alicia as a trial product. He explains it is a salve specifically formulated to treat dry or cracked skin on the hands, a common ailment for those working hard. She opens the container, a look of pleasant surprise crossing her face as the fragrance of lavender flowers wafts from the cream. Gran confirms her suspicion with a nod, pleased that she recognizes the high-quality floral scent. While she is captivated by the scent, he reveals another creation, a distilled floral water made from the same lavender extract, intended for facial skincare. Alicia's eyes widen with intense interest at the mention of a beauty product, her professional demeanor momentarily eclipsed by personal excitement. She is absolutely delighted, thanking Gran profusely for the new products. He advises her on the best application, ideally after washing her face, to maximize the moisturizing and skin-tightening benefits. She is eager to try them immediately, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. She isn't the only one interested in the new line of products. Abel leans in, curious about the conversation he's been left out of, and asks Gran to share some with him as well. This prompts a surprised reaction from the young alchemist, who hadn't realized men were so concerned with their complexion. While the men discuss grooming, she shifts the topic back to the shop's practical needs, requesting a supply of muscle recovery ointment as well. Gran nods in agreement, but their business is interrupted by Kuda, who excitedly announces that the farming equipment Gran ordered has finally arrived. Hearing about the delivery, Abel offers his strength to help move the heavy crates from the warehouse. However, the young boy waves him off with a confident grin, explaining that the magical ring Gran gifted him makes even the heaviest loads feel light. He's actually finding the physical labor quite enjoyable thanks to the enchantment. As the boy heads off to handle the supplies, the atmosphere in the shop settles into a professional rhythm. Kirsch retreats to the back room to continue her chores, leaving Alicia to begin the process of settling the accounts for the latest batch of potions Gran delivered. As she works, Abel's attention is caught by the strange device in her hands. He asks what it is, noting he's never seen such a tool for counting. Alicia looks up from her coins, equally fascinated by the wooden frame and sliding beads she's using to tally the payment. Seeing their confusion, Gran steps in to explain the device's origin. He describes it as an abacus, a tool designed for calculating foreign numeral systems. Alicia adds her praise, noting how significantly it has increased the speed and accuracy of her daily bookkeeping tasks. The revelation that he provided such a useful tool leaves Abel in awe of his friend's ingenuity. Gran quickly downplays the achievement, admitting he simply observed a merchant from the East using one and decided to replicate the design to help Alicia manage the shop's growing finances. Despite his modesty, the knight is clearly intrigued by the device's potential. He asks if Gran could craft another one for him and provide a few lessons on its operation. Gran is taken aback by the request, questioning why someone who isn't a merchant would have any need for a specialized calculation tool. He laughs off the practical concerns, admitting a simple desire for the novelty of the device. However, he also points out a broader potential use, suggesting that if it truly simplifies complex math, it would be an invaluable asset for government officials and administrators who handle large-scale logistics. He stands with Gran as Kirsch arrives, her voice ringing out to greet them. She thanks them for waiting, her timing impeccable as they prepare for the day's work. Following the morning's greeting, the group sets up a stall in the bustling market. Gran displays a variety of magical accessories and trinkets, while Abel remains by his side, assisting with the sales as the crowd begins to gather. Once the initial rush subsides, the two companions examine their inventory. Abel remarks that these items are far more than simple trinkets. They are sophisticated magical tools that demonstrate Gran's growing expertise. To illustrate his point, he picks up a water flask, explaining how a water magic stone keeps the liquid inside perpetually cold through an insulation effect. He then points to a hair clip that can change the wearer's hair color, noting its potential for stealth and disguise. Shifting his focus, Gran presents a large, ornate brooch, wondering aloud if there is a demand for such stylish pieces among women. He explains that it's a powerful tool, even suggesting it could be used for cross-dressing if needed. This revelation causes a moment of confusion for his companion, who asks if the brooch is intended for a woman in distress. When Gran clarifies its versatile nature, Abel's expression turns to one of concern. He warns Gran that selling such high-quality items to the wrong people, especially greedy nobles or unscrupulous merchants, could lead to trouble. He insists on acting as an intermediary to ensure Gran isn't taken advantage of by those seeking to profit from his inventions. Continuing his stern advice, he questions whether Gran has officially registered these new creations with the Commerce Guild. He points out that Gran's tendency to produce strange but effective magical tools requires proper documentation to avoid legal complications. Because the situation is becoming more complex, he suggests a visit to the Magic Tool Guild is also necessary. He proposes a trip to the royal capital using teleportation magic, where they can visit the Commerce Guild and settle the registrations once and for all. Finally, he demands a clear answer, his gaze intense as he waits for Gran's commitment. Gran relents, promising to accompany him to the capital and ensure all his magical inventions are registered according to the law. He is deep in concentration at his market stall when a familiar voice calls out to him. Startled, he looks up to see Alicia standing there with a group of women, realizing he had been so absorbed in his craft that he hadn't noticed their arrival. Because of the sudden interest, he quickly shifts into his role as a merchant, welcoming the group. One of the women inquires about a hair clip, curious about how it changes the wearer's hair color, and he explains that it can transform the strands into various shades, even offering a demonstration. Encouraged by his explanation, the woman decides to try it for herself. He watches with a polite smile as she carefully fastens the magical accessory into her hair, eager to see the results of his handiwork. Moments later, a soft glow emanates from the clip, and her hair instantly shifts to a vibrant blonde. She gasps in delight at the transformation, and despite the price of 2 large silver coins being a bit steep, she happily hands over the payment, thrilled with her new look. As he accepts the coins, he takes a moment to provide some essential maintenance advice. He explains that if the magic within the stone begins to fade and the color dulls, it simply needs to be recharged with more mana to restore its function. In addition to the clip, he offers her a small jar of medicinal cream as a bonus, suggesting she try it out. She is visibly touched by the gesture, thanking him warmly as she clutches her new treasures. The success of the first sale draws even more attention, and another woman steps forward, asking if he can create a clip that produces a strawberry blonde hue. He confirms that it is possible, but asks for a little time to adjust the enchantment, while simultaneously finalizing another sale for the same price. Meanwhile, Alicia stands back and observes the bustling activity at the stall. She watches him handle the growing crowd with a mix of professional pride and quiet amusement, noting how naturally he has taken to the role of a master craftsman. The market square is alive with energy as the day progresses, with people moving between the various stalls under the bright sun. The atmosphere is one of festive productivity, centered around the young inventor's popular new creations. As the rush finally begins to taper off, Abel approaches the stall, noticing that his friend has been so focused on his work that he likely hasn't eaten. He offers a plate of sandwiches, insisting that he take a break to nourish himself after such a successful morning of business. He stands beside Gran, observing the young merchant as he contemplates his next business move. Gran wonders aloud if he will soon be able to handle larger projects, specifically pondering the complexities of enchanting substantial silver products. He explains the technical hurdles, noting that while standard silver items are common, enchanting something of significant size with misteel requires a remarkably stable foundation. He describes a meticulous process of mixing a small amount of magic gold into the silver and applying a thin layer of misteel to the back, creating a complex but highly effective magic tool that far surpasses ordinary goods. Their technical discussion is interrupted when a woman approaches the stall with a look of hesitant curiosity. She lingers at the edge of the counter, her eyes darting between the various items as she struggles to find the right moment to speak. She finally gathers her courage and asks to see a specific brooch on display. Abel watches the interaction quietly, reflecting on how intimidating it can be for a woman to approach a stall run by two men, despite Gran's welcoming demeanor. The merchant greets her with a warm smile, apologizing for his lack of foresight and immediately offering her a chance to try the brooch. He explains that he has applied a subtle magic to the piece, designed to ensure the wearer is noticed and appreciated without the effect feeling forced or overwhelming. The moment she pins the accessory to her blouse, her eyes widen in sheer astonishment. The magical effect is instantaneous and far more potent than she imagined, leaving her breathless as she enthusiastically declares her decision to purchase it on the spot. She readily hands over 4 large silver coins, a price she considers an absolute bargain for such a remarkable item. Gran accepts the payment gratefully, though he continues to reflect on how he can better cater to his female clientele in the future. He offers her a prototype item as a special bonus, a gesture of appreciation for her patronage. With a polite request to touch her hand, he piques her curiosity about this mysterious additional gift he has prepared. He carefully applies a shimmering, translucent liquid to her fingernails, explaining that it is a new type of cosmetic treatment. She watches in fascination as her nails take on a beautiful, polished luster, a finishing touch that clearly delights her. She departs the stall with a radiant smile, promising to return and share her thoughts on both the brooch and the nail treatment. Once she is out of earshot, Alicia approaches Gran, her professional interest piqued by the nail liquid and the potential for a formal registration with the Merchant Guild. She watches as Gran, Abel, and Kirsch reunite, the atmosphere light and friendly as they exchange greetings. The group seems energized by their recent successes, ready to discuss their next steps in the bustling market environment. He presents a simple misanga to Abel, explaining his innovative idea to apply specific enchantments on the spot based on whatever a customer might need. It is a flexible approach to business that highlights his growing confidence in his magical crafting abilities. The young girl leans in, her curiosity piqued by the colorful bands, while the crafter admits that the full extent of the possible enchantments is still something of a mystery even to him. He is eager to experiment, though he remains cautious about the limits of such small items. Abel points out that as business partners, they should truly understand the product's value, asking which specific enchantments would be most practical for a common traveler. He emphasizes the importance of knowing their inventory inside and out before offering it to the public. The young man details the practical benefits he has in mind, such as neutralizing mild toxins from food or common insect stings. He justifies a low price of just 1 silver coin, noting that the materials, common embroidery thread and spider silk, are inexpensive and easy to source. He further explains that the magic within these threads is temporary, fading away after only 2 or 3 uses. Because of this limited lifespan, he views them as disposable goods rather than permanent equipment, which is why he set the price so low. This revelation sparks a fiery response from Kirsch, who argues passionately that the protection offered against dangerous forest creatures like vipers and spiders is invaluable. She insists that even a temporary shield against such lethal threats is worth far more than a single silver coin. She continues her lecture, asserting that he must learn to properly value the life-saving potential of his work. Her eyes burn with conviction as she tells him that he is severely underestimating the market demand for safety, regardless of the item's durability. Abel watches the exchange with a knowing smile, glad that Gran has someone as sharp as Kirsch to manage the business side of things. He encourages her to keep correcting the crafter's lack of market sense, recognizing that her expertise is the perfect complement to his magical talent. The discussion concludes with a plan for the upcoming market day, with Gran agreeing to let Kirsch handle the pricing and sales strategy. She is eager to help, and they look forward to seeing how the public reacts to their new line of protective charms. He listens as the young girl declares her intention to mold him into a first-class merchant, her eyes sparkling with ambition. Despite her enthusiasm, he gently counters, explaining that his heart lies in craftsmanship rather than trade, though she seems undeterred by his humble aspirations. As they continue their conversation, the seasoned adventurer Abel approaches, offering words of praise for the day's efforts. The girl quickly pivots, inquiring about the market's success, while Abel admits he spent most of his time tending the stall while the young craftsman focused on his work, promising to examine the new creations more closely later. Leaving the marketplace behind, the trio walks together, the young man offering a sheepish laugh as the girl maintains her focused demeanor. The weight of the day's business seems to linger in the air between them as they head toward the town's exit. Suddenly, a sharp sound from the distance catches his attention, causing him to freeze in his tracks. The girl senses the shift in atmosphere, questioning the source of the disturbance, while he begins to suspect that a powerful creature might have appeared nearby, given the sudden tension in the air. Their suspicions are confirmed when a frantic adventurer rushes toward them, gasping for breath as he delivers dire news. An emergency request has been issued. A massive tortoise has emerged, its rocky form completely obstructing the eastern highway and halting all travel from the town. A massive tortoise, a creature of stone and scale, looms over the landscape like a living mountain. Classified as an A+ rank threat, it consumes minerals and poses a grave danger to any who dare to cross its path. Inside the bustling guild hall, a frantic adventurer shouts the dire news, There are no high-ranking warriors available to face the A+ rank beast that has appeared. The air is thick with tension as the realization of their vulnerability sinks in, leaving the gathered crowd in a state of growing unease. Because of this shortage, the guild master debates the crisis with his advisors. They cannot risk lower-ranked recruits, yet waiting for a formal survey team would take too long, potentially cutting off vital trade routes and causing the town's resources to dwindle dangerously. Listening to the grim report, Marina questions the true nature of the threat, wondering if the Rick Tortoise is as invincible as the rumors suggest. Beside her, Gran remains silent, his eyes fixed on the map as he absorbs the gravity of the situation unfolding before them. As they stand there, the guild receptionist recognizes the two adventurers. She notes that while they recently processed their transfer, they are currently ranked as B-class, a status that usually wouldn't qualify them for a mission of this magnitude. She continues, identifying Abel as an A-rank adventurer, a revelation that catches Marina completely by surprise. The elf looks at her companion with newfound respect, realizing she had underestimated the prowess of the man standing beside her. He then proposes a compromise to the guild master, suggesting that since the strength of these creatures can vary wildly, a preliminary investigation is necessary. He argues that a small, mobile team could gather vital data before the guild commits to a full-scale, and potentially disastrous, military engagement. He stands before the guild leadership, absorbing the gravity of the situation. The guild master explains that the town is under lockdown and an emergency request has been issued, noting that Abel, being affiliated with the royal capital, isn't subject to the same compulsory orders. Nearby, a group of seasoned warriors debates the feasibility of a frontal assault. One argues that with enough numbers, a subjugation might be possible, but his companion quickly counters, pointing out that if their blades cannot even scratch the beast's hide, 100 men would be no more effective than one. Listening intently to their grim assessment, the young adventurer realizes the futility of a standard military approach. The veteran emphasizes that without the means to bypass the creature's natural armor, the Rick Tortoise remains an insurmountable wall. Turning back to the receptionist and the guild master, he proposes a compromise, a scouting mission to assess the monster's physical composition from a safe distance. Alicia reluctantly agrees, her voice laced with concern as she pleads for him to prioritize his own safety above all else. As the sun hangs over the quiet town, the terms of the contract are finalized. While the investigation itself is classified as an A-rank task, any successful subjugation would be rewarded as a B-rank mission, reflecting the immense danger and the value of the materials involved. Later, as the group makes their way through the streets, Kuda looks up in admiration, wondering if his companion has a hidden talent for high-stakes negotiations. The young man simply shrugs, his mind already focused on the logistical challenges ahead. Marina, walking alongside them, voices a practical concern regarding the unpredictable nature of such missions. She asks what the protocol would be if the investigation inadvertently escalated into a full-blown confrontation and they were forced to slay the beast. He explains that the guild's system is flexible. An accidental victory would simply shift the reward structure from a scouting fee to a subjugation bounty. Furthermore, he points out the pragmatic advantage. A smaller party means a larger share of the rare materials harvested from the carcass. Despite his logical breakdown, she remains skeptical, reminding him that their primary objective is information gathering. He nods in agreement, reaffirming that they must avoid unnecessary combat at all costs, as their current goal is strictly observation. Delving into the technicalities of the beast's shell, he speculates on its composition, comparing it to legendary metals like orichalcum or adamantite. He believes that unless the creature possesses absolute magical immunity, they have a fighting chance, though Abel remains humble, doubting if his own spells will be of much use against such a type. He leads the group back toward their lodgings as the sun begins to set, emphasizing the need for a thorough strategy session before they depart. Even if magic proves ineffective, he remains confident that they can find a way to bring the beast down through physical means and careful planning. Inside, he pores over the details of the target, noting the high-grade materials like oroborite and adamantite that likely compose its shell. Despite his A++ rank, he acknowledges the necessity of a proper appraisal and a solid plan, much to the quiet observation of his companions. Once they reach the craggy outskirts of the beast's territory, he shares his past experience, recalling a previous encounter with a smaller specimen. He warns Marina that this one will likely employ devastating, wide-area attacks, urging her to stay alert and dodge when the time comes. The group takes their positions among the jagged rocks, with him observing that a simple long-range opening won't suffice for a creature of this scale. The strategy is clear. They must wear down its stamina until Abel can deliver a decisive magical blow. With a final, determined look toward the massive, stone-like form of the Rick Tortoise, he signals the start of the operation. The time for talk has ended, and the hunt begins in earnest. He lunges forward with explosive speed, activating a physical enhancement technique that surges through his limbs. Aiming for a perceived weakness, he drives his blade toward the creature's eye, hoping to blind the mountain-sized adversary. The massive head of the tortoise rears back as the strike connects, its gargantuan form casting a shadow over the battlefield. He grins, satisfied that his initial gambit has successfully drawn the beast's full, ireful attention. Retreating momentarily to a safer distance, he downs a physical enhancement potion to bolster his strength for the next phase. He knows the window of opportunity is narrow, as the creature's natural defenses will soon adapt to the sensory confusion. He senses a shift in the air and prepares for the inevitable retaliation, correctly predicting a wide-range Earth attribute assault. Utilizing enchanted boots that grant him temporary levitation, he leaps into the air to escape the impending upheaval of the ground below. The earth shatters with terrifying force, far exceeding his expectations of a standard counterattack. As the dust billows, he realizes the beast might be capable of manipulating gravity or its own immense mass, a revelation that turns his confidence into sudden, sharp alarm. He dodges the rain of stone, calculating the remaining time on his enhancement. His task is clear: keep the beast's attention while Abel prepares the final blow, even as the 5-minute window of his potion begins to close. Moving with desperate speed, the young adventurer knows he must remain the sole target to keep his companion's presence hidden. He has pushed his body to its absolute limit, yet the creature remains an immovable wall of earth and spite. With a grunt of effort, he throws his weight against the massive, stony hide. The sheer scale of the beast is overwhelming, a mountain of living rock that refuses to budge despite his frantic assault. The recoil from the impact rattles his bones, forcing a grimace of pain. He had hoped to avoid using his last resort due to the severe strain it puts on the body, but the situation has grown too dire for hesitation. He pulls a vial from his belt, a potent physical enhancement concoction brewed from the blood of a green drake. As the thick liquid burns down his throat, a surge of raw, violent power begins to knit through his muscles, far more intense than the previous draft. Crouching low, the warrior becomes a conduit for the potion's volatile energy. The earth beneath his boots shatters and cracks as he readies himself for one final, explosive effort to breach the monster's defenses. He lunges forward, every fiber of his being screaming as he pits his magically enhanced strength against the gargantuan weight of the Rick Tortoise, driving his shoulder into the beast with the force of a falling star. A thunderous crack echoes through the clearing as the force of his strike sends shockwaves through the beast's shell. Though the creature doesn't topple, the impact is enough to leave it dazed and momentarily paralyzed, its massive form wreathed in dust and debris. The unnatural strength begins to fade, replaced by a nauseating wave of potion sickness that threatens to buckle his knees. He staggers, his vision blurring, but he finds a grim satisfaction in knowing he has fulfilled his role in this desperate gambit. As he catches his breath, Abel steps forward, magic already swirling in his palm like a miniature sun. They briefly discuss the unexpected ferocity of the beast's wide-range attacks, but with the creature finally vulnerable, the time for talk has passed. He looks down at his companion, dismissing the previous struggle as a mere margin of error in their grand plan. Stepping forward with newfound resolve, he declares that his preparations are complete and instructs the exhausted warrior to leave the final blow to him. As he begins to channel his mana, the sheer intensity of his presence leaves his friend in awe, realizing he is witnessing the power of a true master of the arcane. He ascends into the air, his body enveloped in a radiant aura as he prepares to unleash a spell of immense complexity. A violent surge of energy erupts around the massive beast. Despite the Rick Tortoise's legendary resilience against both blade and spell, it remains bound by the fundamental laws of nature. The strategy is revealed. Every living being requires air to survive. By utilizing high-level spatial magic, the mage isolated the space surrounding the creature and systematically removed the atmosphere within, suffocating the titan where it stood. With its life force extinguished, the mountain-sized creature collapses into the earth. As the dust settles, the mage slowly descends back to the ground, his task finally complete. He sits amidst the debris, his body heavy with fatigue, but his spirit lightened by their victory. Looking at his powerful ally, he can't help but feel grateful for having such an extraordinary friend by his side as the hunt officially comes to an end. The landscape is quiet, but confusion hangs in the air. A massive creature, a Rick Tortoise, has vanished from the site where it was being investigated, leaving the local scouts baffled by its sudden disappearance. Abel stands calmly beside Gran, explaining the situation to the bewildered onlookers. He clarifies that after the beast was subdued, Gran utilized his spatial magic to store the massive carcass, much to the surprise of those who hadn't witnessed the feat. He continues the explanation, addressing the guards' questions about the creature's resilience. It seems the Rick Tortoise possessed a natural resistance to magic, making its physical defeat a significant accomplishment for the pair. As the conversation shifts, Marina is questioned about her connection to the renowned mage. She admits that while she recognizes the name of the White Knight Mage from the Royal Capital Guild, they are not personal acquaintances. Suddenly, Lydia interjects with palpable excitement, her eyes wide as she confirms their identities. She speaks of the legendary figures standing before them, her voice filled with admiration for the guild's elite members. She goes on to detail their exploits, mentioning that they aren't just skilled adventurers, but celebrated dragon slayers. The weight of their achievements begins to settle on the surrounding crowd. The revelation leaves the guards in a state of shock, their skepticism replaced by awe. They look upon the group with newfound respect, realizing the caliber of the individuals who have aided them. A formal record is produced, its pages detailing the subjugation of high-ranking threats. It serves as a silent testament to the dangerous work these adventurers undertake, documenting victories against S-rank monsters. With the situation resolved and the threat neutralized, the guards offer their thanks. They prepare to depart, promising to relay the news of the successful hunt and the presence of such distinguished heroes to their lord. Abel expresses his deep gratitude to the group, remarking on how smoothly the entire operation proceeded thanks to their expertise. Marina and Lydia listen intently as he prepares to take his leave, his mission finally complete. He becomes suddenly overwhelmed with excitement. grasping the young man's hands and shaking them vigorously while promising to boast of their incredible exploits to his fan club. The others watch the display with a mixture of amusement and slight bewilderment at his sudden burst of energy. The young adventurer stands in a well-equipped kitchen, discussing the complex preparation of the tortoise. He requests that the meat, blood, and liver be brought out for immediate use, while suggesting the durable skin and shell be stored for future needs. He reflects on the whirlwind of activity following their return to the city, from filing official reports at the guild to managing the mountain of materials they harvested. Amidst these responsibilities, he makes a point to invite his friends, including the young shopgirl and a guild receptionist, to share in a special celebratory meal. Standing before a massive, intimidating slab of tortoise meat, he prepares for the daunting task of butchering the creature, carving out just enough for the day's feast. With ingredients assembled, fresh meat, liver, and mushrooms, he begins the culinary process, carefully preparing a balanced broth. As he slices into the meat, he recalls that tortoise liver is known for its potent tonic effects, similar to rare medicinal herbs. He wonders if the rumors of its revitalizing properties are true and decides to find out for himself. The dark, rich liver is sliced thin and added to the bubbling pot, its savory aroma beginning to fill the kitchen. He meticulously schemes the surface of the simmering stew, removing impurities to ensure the broth remains clear and flavorful. He begins the final preparations, skillfully dicing vegetables before turning his attention to the meat, which he seasons thoroughly with salt and soy sauce to ensure the flavors penetrate deep within. Once the oil reaches the perfect temperature, he carefully introduces the seasoned pieces to the pan, maintaining a steady heat as they begin to sizzle and pop. The savory aroma of the frying meat quickly fills the kitchen, a scent so enticing that it brings a satisfied smile to his face as he watches the coating turn a crisp, golden brown. Using his chopsticks, he lifts a single piece from the pan, observing the steam curling off the perfectly fried exterior. With the first batch complete, he presents a bowl overflowing with the golden morsels, eager to confirm if the taste lives up to the incredible smell. The moment he takes a bite, his eyes widen in delight. The meat is exceptionally tender, releasing a burst of savory juice that far exceeds his expectations. He realizes that while the flavor is reminiscent of high-quality chicken, the texture is much firmer and more satisfying, providing a rich depth with every chew. Comparing it to the tortoise he sampled back in the dungeon, he concludes that this high-rank specimen is on an entirely different level, making it impossible to stop at just one piece. After satisfying his initial hunger, he shifts his focus to the next dish, carefully slicing the tortoise liver and impera into thin, delicate strips with practiced precision. He then briefly blanches the sliced pieces in boiling water, noting that the high collagen content will likely be a hit with Alicia, before draining the pot to prepare for the final assembly. He begins by thinly slicing cucumbers into a bowl, seasoning them with a pinch of salt and sugar before soaking the mixture in vinegar. While the vegetables marinate, he explains to Marina that he is preparing one more dish, specifically something to accompany their drinks. Turning his attention back to the main ingredients, he carefully slices the meat and liver into bite-sized pieces, noting that the texture is perfect for sashimi. He also takes the blanched milk, cooling it quickly in ice water to preserve its delicate flavor. With the final components ready, he meticulously arranges the food onto fresh green leaves, completing the elaborate spread. Stepping outside the kitchen, he calls out to Abel, announcing that the feast is finally served. The door swings open as he and Kirsch rush in, their excitement palpable as they declare they have been eagerly waiting for this moment. Even Arrow approaches, drawn by the savory aromas, while he looks on in mild disbelief at the sheer variety of dishes prepared. The table is laden with a magnificent tortoise feast, featuring golden brown fried meat, a steaming hot pot, and the fresh sashimi he just finished. The young man is stunned to realize that every single dish was crafted from the same creature. As they settle in, the host offers a selection of drinks, prompting Abel to suggest a bottle of wine he brought from home, though he warns that it might be quite strong and should be diluted. With everyone gathered and glasses raised high, including a small bowl for Era, they share a joyous toast to celebrate their hard-earned meal. He presents the thinly sliced sashimi, noting how perfectly the delicate flavor of the raw meat pairs with the wine they brought for the occasion. Marina stares at the glistening piece on her fork, her expression a mix of curiosity and slight hesitation as she confirms that it is indeed raw monster meat. After her initial doubt, she takes a tentative bite, finding the texture surprisingly pleasant and clean. Beside her, Abel digs into a large pile of fried food with gusto, while the white deer watches the feast with a calm, regal presence. The flavor catches her off guard, prompting a look of genuine surprise as she realizes how high the quality of the meat truly is. He explains that the meat was fresh and thoroughly purified, offering to let her use her appraisal skills if she has any lingering doubts about its safety. She quickly declines, explaining that she prefers the anticipation of the taste over a clinical analysis of the ingredients, wanting to enjoy the meal as a diner rather than a mage. She continues to enjoy the meal, remarking on how the lack of gaminess and the firm texture make it an excellent accompaniment to the alcohol. He watches her with a satisfied smile, but offers a word of caution, advising her not to overindulge in the blood-rich portions of the dish, as consuming too much could lead to an upset stomach later in the evening. Her attention then shifts to a towering platter of golden brown morsels that have been fried to perfection. When she asks if these are the fried pieces of the tortoise, he encourages her to help herself and eat as much as she likes, happy to see his companions enjoying the spread. Taking a large piece for himself, the mage admits that while the sashimi was excellent, he has a particular weakness for the fried preparation. He describes the satisfying, plump texture as the best he's ever encountered, a sentiment that brings a knowing smile to her face as she reflects on how perfectly the hearty dish suits his personality. As he refills their glasses, he asks if she has developed a definitive preference for the raw preparation over the cooked ones. She muses that it likely depends on her mood and the specific day, appreciating the variety of flavors he has managed to extract from a single creature. She finds the whole spread to be a perfect reflection of his culinary spirit, thoughtful and expertly executed. He chuckles at the compliment, urging her not to fill up only on the fried delicacies and to make sure she tries the other lighter dishes he has prepared to balance the meal. Next, he introduces a refreshing vinegar-based dish and a steaming hot pot filled with savory ingredients. When she inquires about the broth, he explains that this particular soup is meant to highlight the natural flavors of the meat and vegetables rather than being a standalone drink. He specifically requests that she leave some of the liquid behind so he can repurpose it for a final course, a level of culinary foresight that leaves her impressed by his deep understanding of the craft. The mage takes a sip of the rich broth and is immediately struck by its incredible depth and complexity. He exclaims at the flavor, questioning if such a luxurious liquid is truly intended just as a seasoning for the other ingredients rather than being the main attraction itself. He marveled at the unexpected depth of flavor, noting that the meat possessed a richness far beyond his expectations as he watched the broth simmer. Seeing the small creature and the great deer dive into their bowls with such gusto, he couldn't help but chuckle. Realizing he shouldn't be left behind, he prepared to take another hearty serving for himself. They all fell into a rhythmic silence, punctuated only by the sounds of satisfied sighs. The warmth of the meal seemed to radiate through them, bringing a sense of profound contentment to the entire group. She spoke softly of the meat's texture, describing it as firm yet yielding, releasing a gentle and deep umami that lingered on the palate. He nodded in fervent agreement, his own bowl already nearly empty as they both savored the exquisite flavor. While the companions discussed the culinary nuances, the two beasts continued their relentless assault on the food. Their speed was so impressive that Marina began to worry they might be overindulging. The young chef laughed at the sight, encouraging everyone to keep eating since there was still plenty of meat to go around. Taking a bite himself, he looked forward to the next stage of the meal he had planned. The guild receptionist joined in the praise, her hands clasped in delight as she commented on the wonderful, crunchy texture of certain morsels. Gran mentioned that the dish was even rumored to have beauty-enhancing properties, which excited her greatly, while Marina wondered if she should save some of the precious broth for later. She asked if there was anything else to come, her curiosity piqued by the dwindling contents of the pot. Gran explained that since the main ingredients were finished, it was the perfect time to transition to a rice porridge, and he prepared to add rice to the rich essence left in the soup. With practiced ease, he cracked several eggs into a bowl and whisked them together before slowly drizzling the golden liquid into the bubbling pot. He adjusted the flame to a steady medium heat, ensuring the eggs would cook into a light, fluffy texture. As the steam rose from the thickening porridge, he held up a hand to stay the eager gazes of the deer and the elf. He told them to wait just a moment longer, for the final transformation of the meal was almost complete. He stirs the pot as the steam billows upward, signaling the completion of the final course. Marina watches with anticipation, her eyes fixed on the bubbling mixture as the savory scent fills the air. With a steady hand, he begins to ladle the thick, steaming porridge into bowls, the rich broth glistening under the light. The dish is a masterpiece of simplicity, Tortoise and egg zosue, where the essence of the monster meat has been fully absorbed by the grains of rice. She leans in, inhaling the fragrant steam with a look of pure delight, while he gently cautions her to be careful, as the freshly served meal is still scalding hot. Ignoring the heat, she takes a tentative first bite, her expression shifting from curiosity to sheer bliss as the flavors explode on her palate. He explains that the secret lies in allowing the rice to soften and soak up every drop of the concentrated broth, creating a harmonious blend of textures. He takes a spoonful for himself, closing his eyes to savor the familiar, comforting taste of a job well done. Nearby, the great deer Era dines with equal enthusiasm, its large eyes reflecting the warmth of the shared meal. The majestic creature lets out a soft sound of satisfaction between bites. Marina notes how the gentle sweetness of the egg provides a perfect accent to the savory depth of the soup, making each mouthful better than the last. Having quickly finished its portion, the deer nudges its empty bowl forward, its silent request for more clear to everyone. The atmosphere is one of communal joy as they all dig in, the clatter of spoons against bowls filling the room. She eagerly holds out her bowl for a second helping, her appetite seemingly boundless after such a delicious revelation. As the last of the porridge is cleared from the pot, she leans back with a contented sigh, reflecting on how such a warming dish is perfect for the coming cold seasons. She suggests that they should return to hunt the Tortoise once the frost sets in, already looking forward to their next feast. She had just finished her suggestion when the young man pondered the nature of their prey. He admitted his ignorance regarding the Tortoise ecology, wondering aloud if the creatures entered hibernation during the colder months. Beside him, the small horned rabbit continued to feast, its enthusiasm for the meal undiminished. She began clearing the table as she proposed a plan to investigate dungeons where sightings of the creatures had been reported. Surprised by her singular focus, he questioned just how much she intended to eat, noting that her desire for the delicacy seemed to have become a driving force. She stretched her arms toward the night sky, a look of pure contentment on her face. To her, The pursuit of flavor was the most natural of human desires, a fundamental urge that justified their upcoming excursions into the dark. Once the meal was finished and the cleanup complete, she underwent a sudden change in demeanor. With a terrifyingly intense expression, she seized the mage, forced him into more formal attire, and used teleportation magic to whisk him away into the capital's nightlife, leaving the quiet of the feast far behind. The day after the chaotic events involving the Tortoise, things finally began to settle. After a night spent in the capital, the necessary paperwork at the Adventurers and Merchants Guilds was finally completed. Returning home at last, the familiar sight of the sturdy, multi-story residence offered a much-needed sense of peace after the recent turmoil. Inside, the conversation turned toward the spoils of the hunt. She, her silver hair catching the light, inquired eagerly about the materials gathered, specifically the properties of the Tortoise blood. They sat together in the quiet room, the weight of their recent journey still lingering in the air as they prepared to delve deeper into the mysteries of their craft. She leaned forward, her curiosity piqued as she asked for a detailed account of the battle. She was particularly interested in how the bows and potions had been utilized against such a formidable foe. Taking a slow sip of her tea, she cautioned that any new potions would need rigorous testing before they could be brought to market. She suggested that her own family might have the right connections to ensure everything was handled properly. Her ideas continued to flow, even suggesting the development of specialized potions, such as those used by young women for their nails, leaving her companion slightly overwhelmed by her business acumen. Later, a trusted friend and ally offered words of encouragement. He insisted that the young man's hard work deserved fair recognition and promised to support his endeavors as a producer with everything he had. Despite the support, the weight of the day's social interactions seemed to take its toll. As she prepared to depart, he sighed, expressing a desire to avoid any further complications before heading out himself. Their departure was interrupted by a sudden arrival. She looked on with mild surprise, noting that it was rare for him to have friends visiting his home. She turns to leave, her white robes catching the light as she offers a final, cryptic remark about the nature of their meeting. Gran stands in the doorway, his expression a mix of exasperation and lingering curiosity as he watches her prepare to depart. He steps out toward the wooden gate, noting that the barrier spells placed around the property should prevent any unauthorized entry. Beside him, a large, shaggy beast snorts, its presence a familiar comfort in the quiet afternoon. While he stands there, 3 young girls gather beyond the wooden slats of the gate, peering through the gaps with wide, inquisitive eyes. They whisper among themselves, sensing a powerful residue of mana emanating from within the grounds that shouldn't be there. They are startled when Gran leans over the gate, asking if they have business at his home. The sudden appearance of the homeowner catches them off guard, their small hands gripping the wooden beams as they look up at him. The young man sighs, rubbing the back of his neck as the girls react with a mixture of shock and frantic energy. One of them shouts in surprise, realizing they've been spotted by a human, while another frets about being scolded for their intrusion. He begins to pull the gate shut, bluntly informing them that if they have no actual business, he is far too busy to entertain guests. The girls cry out in protest, desperate to keep the connection open before the heavy wood latches shut. Because of his dismissal, they reach through the bars, their voices rising in a chorus of pleas for him to wait. Their faces are etched with urgency, their eyes pleading for just a moment of his time to explain their presence. The youth pauses, his hand still on the gate as he looks back at the persistent trio. He wonders what could possibly be so important that they would risk trespassing on a mage's property. As he listens, they explain that they can feel the lingering scent of their guardian's mana coming from inside the house. The realization that someone they know was recently here fills them with a mix of hope and anxiety. They begin to describe their guardian with reverent detail, speaking of her striking white hair, her tall and graceful stature, and her overwhelming strength. As they praise her beauty and power, Gran's eyes widen in realization, looking back toward the house where the mysterious woman had just been standing. He informs the trio that the woman they seek is not present, nor has anyone matching her description ever visited his home. The girls' expressions fall, their hope visibly dimming as they process his words. Despite his denial, the girls whisper among themselves, noting that they can still sense a trace of Lotto's mana lingering in the air, though they concede it might simply be a coincidence from her passing by. Seeing their hesitation, he asks if they are finally convinced that their search here is fruitless, to which they reluctantly agree, acknowledging that they have no choice but to move on. Resting his arms on the wooden gate, he ponderously considers the situation, finding it hard to believe that someone of Lotto's stature would resort to sneaking into a human residence just to scavenge for food. He then inquires if they are capable of finding their way back home unaided. They assure him they can, offering a polite farewell as they prepare to depart from his property. Before they can leave, the young man calls out to them, reaching into his pack to offer a handful of human treats. The girls' eyes light up with pure joy at the unexpected gift, though he quickly warns them to finish the snacks before Lotto catches them, fearing her potential anger. With the gift accepted, he bids them a safe journey, watching as they begin their trek away from his gate with renewed spirits. They call back their thanks, promising to return and play again soon, a prospect that leaves him momentarily stunned and questioning his own hospitality. Returning to the warmth of his home, he is greeted by Vicky, who playfully teases him about his sudden popularity with the local youth, suggesting he has a way with young girls. He dismisses the jest, his mind still on the strange encounter. While they appeared as children, he is certain they were not human, likely being spirits or demi-humans from the depths of the forest whom he has never encountered before. He sits across from the silver-haired woman, listening as she teases him about having potentially tamed the mysterious visitors from the forest. He sighs, resting his head on his hand, clearly exhausted by the day's strange encounters and skeptical of her playful assessment. As he reflects on the ethereal girls dancing in the woods, she suggests that if the opportunity arises, he should speak with Abel about the matter, implying there is more to their presence than simple curiosity. The following morning, he watches from the porch as the woman of the house prepares to depart, entrusting him with the care of the home while she goes to retrieve the others. Later, he finds himself seated in the back of a jolting horse-drawn carriage, traveling alongside a woman and a young boy. The woman expresses her surprise, questioning if he truly lives so close to the infamous Forest of Magic, a place most avoid. She continues her explanation, describing the vast woods to the north of Paimon as a place teeming with monsters and wild beasts. She asks if he was aware of the danger, but his stunned expression suggests he had no idea of the forest's reputation. The conversation deepens as she describes the lack of a clear border, explaining that the area near the entrance serves as a precarious buffer zone between the human world and the domain of monsters, where the rules of nature begin to blur. While people once resided near the forest's edge, she notes that most have since retreated to the safety of the town, leaving the area sparsely populated. He admits his ignorance, explaining that he had simply been entering the woods to forage for medicinal herbs without a second thought. Reassuring him, she explains that the forest itself seems to turn back those who venture too deep, often depositing them back at the entrance before they realize what has happened. As they approach his destination, he points out his home nestled in the distance, relieved to be back. Upon returning to the house, he is greeted by the mistress of the home, who informs him with a knowing look that they have unexpected visitors waiting inside, catching him completely off guard. Stepping into the room, he is met with the sight of the three forest girls lounging comfortably on the sofa, having already finished their cookies and now eagerly demanding lunch. Behind him, the silver-haired woman can't help but chuckle, observing that he has indeed made some persistent new friends. He stands at the threshold, caught off guard as the woman from the carriage asks if the three girls are his family. Thinking quickly, he claims they are merely relatives, hoping to avoid a more complicated explanation for their sudden presence. Following his lead, the three sisters step forward to introduce themselves with practiced grace. The eldest identifies herself as Ulu, followed by the second sister, Vel, and finally the youngest, Kuru, their polite manners contrasting with their wild origins. He then introduces himself to the visitors as Gran, a friend of Abel. The woman, her expression softening into a warm smile, seems satisfied with the introduction and the hospitality being offered. She introduces herself as Alicia, a merchant from the town of Paimon, and presents her younger sister, Kirsch. The group begins to filter into the modest home, filling the space with a new, bustling energy. Seeing the house becoming crowded, he suggests that they all relax while he prepares a meal, proposing they eat outside where there is more room for everyone to sit comfortably. She readily agrees to the plan, her polite demeanor making the sudden influx of guests feel less like an intrusion and more like a gathering of friends. While setting up the table in the yard, he expresses his gratitude to Alicia for her help in managing the situation. He asks if she learned anything about the mysterious trio during their journey, to which she remarks that they appeared almost like descendants of a goddess. The young man ponders this as he carries a stack of dishes, wondering if the girls could truly be the guardians of the forest that Shama had mentioned earlier. The possibility adds a layer of weight to his responsibility. He recalls a conversation at the gate where the girls mentioned that their guardian's lingering magic was what drew them to this specific house, suggesting a deep connection between his home and the forest's protectors. She adds to his thoughts, explaining that she heard rumors of the forest's guardians moving toward human lands recently. They were apparently curious about what the girls were doing and eventually tracked them to his doorstep. She had just finished explaining the dire situation, leaving Gran to ponder the mysteries of his new home while he tended to the chores. He couldn't help but wonder if something significant had occurred in this place before his arrival. His thoughts drifted to the few companions he had known since moving in. Aside from the occasional visit from Abel, only the loyal wolf Shamoa had shared his solitude. Suddenly, a calm, ethereal voice interrupted his reflections, offering to provide the answers he sought. He spun around, clutching a paring knife and a handful of fruit in surprise as the mysterious woman in white robes appeared before him and Alicia. He demanded to know her identity, his heart racing at her sudden manifestation. The woman remained silent for a moment, her gaze steady and knowing, before she slowly began to lower her hood. Both he and Alicia watched with bated breath as her features were revealed. She stood before them, a regal figure draped in white, accompanied by a small, horned spirit that seemed to emanate from her very presence. She spoke of the debt she owed and acknowledged the trouble the young forest girls had been causing him. As she spoke, she explained that the children were actually guardians of the deep woods, and that she, Lotto, was their protector. She admitted that while humans were usually unwelcome, Gran's presence had strangely made the girls' lives easier, leading them to frequent his home. Alicia listened intently as the woman clarified that while she was technically monitoring Gran, she had granted him the rare privilege of entering the forest as a form of compensation. She further explained that an ancient contract strictly forbade humans from entering the forest's heart, yet she felt a profound obligation to Gran that overrode these old laws. When he asked what could have prompted such a debt, she prepared to reveal a secret from his past. She reminded him of a specific moment deep within the woods when he had broken the horn of a unicorn, a memory that flashed vividly in his mind as he realized the weight of his past actions. He listens as she explains the situation with a hint of frustration. She reveals that a certain perverted horseman, had been relentlessly pestering the three sisters, causing no end of trouble for the forest's inhabitants. She recalls how the creature would stalk the young ones, its presence a constant shadow over their play. Despite the discomfort it caused, she notes that as guardians of the forest, they cannot simply eliminate a creature merely for being unsettling. There are laws of nature they must uphold. She turns her attention to the spread of food before them, expressing her gratitude. Thanks to his intervention with the unicorn, the forest will enjoy a period of much-needed tranquility. With a faint, knowing look, she even suggests that should the beast's horn ever regrow and it resumes its antics, he should return to deal with it once more. She gestures toward the steaming pot and the freshly prepared dishes, extending a warm invitation. Since the three sisters are also preparing to eat, she proposes they all join together for a small lunch gathering. Her expression softens, a rare moment of warmth crossing her ethereal features as she watches her guests. She watches as the young man readily accepts the offer, his appetite clearly whetted by the aromatic meal. Beside him, his companion can't help but feel that they are being charmed, or perhaps tamed, by the forest protector's unexpected hospitality. Gran brings the food to the table where Lotto and Lara are waiting. He announces that the meal is finally ready, though Lotto seems to have been waiting with a certain stoic patience that almost feels like a lecture. Hearing the call, the rest of the children burst into the room with unbridled enthusiasm. They scramble toward the table, their faces lit up with hunger and excitement as they anticipate the feast. As they all settle in, Alicia gazes at the spread in disbelief, questioning if this is truly the famous cuisine of Tortoise. Gran confirms it with a proud nod, noting that it looks like something from a high-end restaurant in a major city. She is particularly struck by the quality, having heard rumors that the ingredients from that region are renowned for their health and beauty benefits. Her eyes widen as she takes in the aromatic steam rising from the dishes. Despite the savory feast before them, the children immediately begin clamoring for sweets. Lara boldly requests cake, remembering how delicious the cookies were the day before, but Gran gently chides them, telling them to sit properly and wait their turn. He continues to move around the table, serving everyone with practiced ease. He reassures the restless group that while he has prepared a special dessert, they must finish their proper meal first. To accompany the food, he produces a bottle of what he calls magic water, an apple-flavored concoction, and a rich, red liquid he jokingly refers to as the lifeblood of Tortoise. The young man then pours the mixture over ice, and the children watch in absolute fascination as the liquid begins to fizz and bubble vigorously. It is a small moment of culinary magic that leaves them wide-eyed and eager to begin. He carefully adds a drizzle of honey to the glasses, explaining that the base of the juice is the vibrant Tortoise lifeblood. The ice clinks against the glass as the red liquid swirls, creating an inviting, chilled beverage for his companions. As he finishes the preparation, Alicia leans in with a look of mild concern, questioning if the ingredient is truly blood. He quickly clarifies that it is more akin to a mild potion, designed to stimulate circulation and enhance one's natural beauty, a detail that immediately piques her interest. Nearby, the young girls take their first cautious sips, their eyes widening in surprise as the liquid begins to tingle on their tongues. They exchange bewildered glances, asking what could possibly cause such a strange, fizzy sensation in a simple drink.